I call the March 17, 2022 Planning and Zoning meeting to order at 6:31.
Okay.
In attendance are regular members Robert Nowak, Ron Sienna.
Charles Urbano.
You're a regular member?
Yes.
Regular member Charles Urbano. And myself, Tricia Mace. What's
Okay.
next? I think that's a
Minutes
good
of
start.
March 3rd is next.
All right, we can do those.
Have the minutes, or can we do the minutes?
You have,
There it is. This is an hour.
this one. You can borrow this one.
No, I have those. I don't think that's ours.
I'm not sure.
Wait a minute, can we even do that? Me being the only one here, can I do it alone?
Well, in theory, yes. If you want to wait and table it for the next meeting, with more of you were here to do it, that's fine. As long as you have a quorum for the meeting, you can take a vote on the minutes based on whoever was here today, who was here then. But if you feel more comfortable tabling it for the next meeting, there's no urgency to having voted on tonight. It's not.
I'll table it because I know Bill often, he may, sometimes he has a comment, so just want to give him the
Okay,
opportunity.
let me get a motion
have
to
it.
table, and then we'll do that.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Motion to table it?
Okay.
Second.
All right,
Uh,
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes 4-0.
Okay. This is a public hearing, and someone just recall public hearing.
I'll read the notice. Legal notice, North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission hereby given that the North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold an in-person public hearing at 6:30 or sooner thereafter, Wednesday, March 3rd, 17th.
Continued, remember you guys did
Yep,
the same
continuous.
call.
Yep,
Okay.
it was tabled in the, now it's at the North Branford Town Hall Chambers, 909 Foxton Boulevard, North Branford, Connecticut, to consider the following application number 2022-2, proposed zoning text amendment to establish a new floating zone district, section 39, multifamily housing district, otherwise known as MFHD, which will allow under specific circumstances, multifamily housing in dedicated or detached or attached units, including apartments, together with such accessory structures as indicated to such uses. Applicant 24-30, Clintonville Road, Associates, care of Joseph P. Williams, Esquire. At the hearing, all interested persons appear and be heard, and written communication will be received. Copies of the proposal are on file with public inspection in the Town Hall Planning and Zoning Department. William Ganzenzi, Vice Chair.
Okay, seated for this public hearing are regular members Nowak, Sienna, Urbano, and Mace. First, we'll hear from the applicant and open it up for discussion.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Congratulations. It's okay if I call you Madam Chair? And Commission members. My name is Joe Williams. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin. My office is at 265 Church Street in New Haven. I've been practicing land use and environmental law throughout the state of Connecticut for a little over 27 years, and I've had a heavy focus in my practice on multifamily housing development like we'll be talking about here tonight. With me this evening are, right here, Michael Belfonte, who is the principal of your applicant. He's an experienced real estate developer and property manager, and the owner of a long-standing business here in North Branford, which he will tell you about in a moment. Also Mark Forlenza on the end of the table here with MJF and Associates. Mark is the development consultant to Belfonte Companies. He is a highly experienced developer of multifamily housing. He's worked with some of the most successful companies in the field, and he will speak after me to certain of the development parameters that we have proposed to you in the zoning regulation. And last with us is David Dixon, Senior Landscape Architect with SLR Corporation, formerly known as Milona McBroom. And Dave is here and available to answer any questions if the commission has any questions about how certain aspects of the regulation might get applied in practicality and what you would do on a certain property, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure we had Dave available for that sort of thing. But before I get into the regulation, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Belfanti to give you a brief introduction and his rationale behind the application.
Thank you, everybody, and happy St. Patrick's Day. Tonight we're proposing a text amendment, and I want to thank you all for being here. The protocol is to basically have a zone for multifamily apartments here in North Branford. Joe will explain that, as will Mark. I have a personal history here with North Branford. My dad was a principal of Jerome Harrison School many years ago. So for 30 years, I've heard about North Branford and actually helped him in the school during the summers. So my roots are here in North Branford. In addition, we developed the Northford Ice Pavilion about 22 years ago. So that's also a property that we own and manage. It's been a terrific boon for the community, for North Branford. We have over 1 million people a year that go through that facility. So those people spend money on goods and services here in the town, which is a wonderful thing. And we have a great distinction that 12 kids that have come through our doors are now either playing for the NHL or have retired from the NHL. So that's a pretty neat fact. In addition, we have about 40 more acres that are around the ice rink. One of the 6 acres on Clintonville Road could be a possible candidate for the multifamily zone that we're talking about tonight. And we're also talking to a lot of industrial, high bay, and manufacturing uses for other areas that we have land, which is, again, mostly right behind the ice rink. So I'm a business owner here in North Branford, and I'm a landowner as well. That's it, Joe. That's all. I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Michael. So let's dive right in then. We are proposing to you a new regulation to be added to the books for your zoning regulations, and it's Section 39 Multifamily Housing District. And I suppose if I were sitting where you are, the first question in my mind would be, well, why do it? Why should we encourage more multifamily housing here in North Branford? First part of the answer is the marketplace wants it, and Connecticut is way behind. By that I mean multifamily housing is in huge demand. It's really the hottest sector in real estate across the entire state of Connecticut right now. And it's where our the fact is, for whatever their reasons are, and there could be a lot of different reasons, but the fact is, it is where our younger people want to live right now. And the younger generation is simply waiting longer to get married and to buy a home than maybe some of us wanted to do. And for several years in Connecticut, our business leaders, our housing policy advocates, and state and municipal officials have recognized that we have a severe shortage of multifamily housing. In fact, the state legislature amended the zoning statutes last year to try to encourage more multifamily housing to get going in the state. But if we don't solve that great need, then our kids don't come back to Connecticut, and we lose skilled workforce, and our population shrinks. It's harder to attract employers, and it's harder to create and keep good jobs. So that's reason number one, is sort of the economic marketplace-based reason. Second reason is that this commission has recognized the need for more multifamily housing here in North Branford. To your credit, in your 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development, you listed creating additional housing choices to meet demographic trends as one of your 6 overarching goals for the next 10 years in the town of North Branford. I summarized that chapter of your plan in my letter that hopefully everybody has my January 21st letter that I filed with our application. So I won't go through it in detail, but laid that out for you there. But you note in your POCD that the town has had slow population growth, the town is aging, it has limited rental opportunities, and there have been no major multifamily developments built in town in over 20 years. The POCD also states that there is strong regional demand in this region for multifamily housing. 2,500 units have been built in New Haven County between 2013 and 2017, but none of those units were in North Branford. Third reason is your neighbors have welcomed it. As I just mentioned, you stated in your plan that there is strong regional demand for it. And as I stated in my letter to you, many of the towns around North Branford have approved and had constructed pretty sizable multifamily developments over the last several years. And on that note, I wanted to provide you a testimonial from your immediate next door neighbor, if I could, Madam Chair.
We have these already, right?
I don't think this one
Not those.
came in time to get to you all.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
It is in the file, but I'd like to make sure you all have it.
Thanks.
So it's a letter from Mike Frieda, who you may know is first selectman of your immediately neighboring town, North Haven. And I'm not giving this to you to say, North Haven says you should do this, but rather North Haven has had some recent experience. They're right next door. They've allowed and seen some multifamily housing be built. So we asked First Selectman Frieda, would you mind just sharing your experience so the folks in North Branford can hear it, since this is a new thing that we're proposing to you? And Mr. Frieda states he supports the zone change, that North Haven has approved several new apartment communities. He's pleased with it. The communities have added to the grand list, supported local businesses. People spend money at our stores and gas pumps. The town receives personal property tax income from the residents' vehicles. Impact to infrastructure has been minimal, with few demands on fire, police, or the school system. No trash costs, and employers like Quinnipiac University and Amazon have benefited by having luxury apartments located proximate to their in-town location. And he says, I can comfortably say that the new apartment developments have been a fiscal net positive for the town of North Branford. I firmly believe, he concludes, I firmly believe that the proposed zoning change will allow North Branford to move forward with its own successful multifamily projects. So again, I just wanted you to have that recent experience from a nearby town. So that was reason number 3. And then reason number 4 is, as I've alluded to, having new multifamily housing in town is good for local businesses and for economic development. You have letters from 2 of your major employers in North Branford, Honeywell and Brook and Whittle, in support of the new zoning district. In fact, Dick Bauer from Honeywell is here, and he would like, in a few minutes, when you get to the public comments, he would like to say a few words to you about it, so I won't reread his letter to you and steal his thunder. But he can tell you why Honeywell, which is next to the site that Mr. Belfonte talked about, why Honeywell would like to see this kind of housing in town. You may also know that the North Branford Economic Development Commission, about a year ago at its March 2021 meeting, voted a resolution to support Mr. Belfonte's proposal, but also they went a little beyond that and recommended that the appropriate town commission consider reviewing non-conforming matters such as height, density, and sewer connection fees, since the current regulations hamper the type of proposed development from occurring. I just wanted to make sure you knew that the economic development folks in town are specifically encouraging a review of these regulations, because the current regulations are not promoting multifamily housing. And quite simply, employers are supporting it, economic development is supporting it, because having multifamily housing helps employers attract new and younger professional employees to the town and to their business. It helps them retain those employees, and it provides additional customers who spend money at local businesses in town, and will represent a net fiscal positive for the town, as was confirmed by Mr. Frieda from North Haven. So So let's turn, unless there's any questions on that part, let's turn to the regulation itself. Just a few general comments first about the regulation. We're intending it to fill a gap in your regulations and to encourage market rate multifamily housing that's not restricted by age. You do have an age-restricted housing district in town, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But this one is not restricted by age. And the intent is to put into place rules that will make new multifamily housing feasible in town from the perspective of people who know how to build it, who know what it costs, what the site constraints are, and who believe that realistically, if you apply the rules that we are proposing to you, that you will see multifamily housing be built. I think that's important because I've seen the experience happen in many towns where on their own they draft a regulation, they want to say they want to support a certain thing, and a lot of times those regulations get loaded up. They're 25 pages long with every single thing in the world that people want to see. And frankly, the development community looks at those regulations and says, I can't do anything with this. So I just wanted you to hear that point, that we believe this is something that will actually produce results. But in saying that, we made sure to build in limitations in the regulation that will help ensure that multifamily housing is only built on appropriate sites and with appropriate controls. It's not a free-for-all, but rather it'll be well-guided and well regulated. I mentioned the age-restricted district, that's Section 38. We intentionally drew upon that district in drafting this regulation for new Section 39. We used a very similar structure to that regulation. We intentionally brought in a lot of the same provisions. And wherever possible, we also referred to your existing regulations for things like the standards for a special permit or the procedure for a zone change, all of which was to achieve the goal, hopefully, of changing as little as possible of what you already have in your regulations and just simply building upon what's there and where needed. I also want to note, you have a letter from the Lower Connecticut River Valley COG, Council of Governments, dated February 14th, and they have the task of reviewing any town zoning regulations to see, proposed zoning regulations, to weigh in as to whether there will be an impact to other towns or to the region, or in this case to Long Island Sound. And the COG found first that there will be little adverse impact on neighboring towns or Long Island Sound. Second, that providing more diverse housing stock with market rate housing is consistent with the regional plan of conservation and development. And third, that proposals such as this with appropriate conditions should be encouraged. So we are glad to see that.
Did you guys get any feedback or any official documentation from the SCROG meeting on last week, Thursday?
I haven't heard of any other meeting besides the one I just talked about, Madam Chair. Is there another one?
Southern Connecticut. Yeah, the one with like Bethany and Woodbridge gets held in North Haven. It was on the agenda. Bill went. I couldn't make it.
I don't know if you heard anything, Eric.
We received no comments. We had no further feedback.
Okay.
Beyond what you had.
You guys didn't know it was on there?
No.
Oh. How do they know?
Well, they get, I think they'll get a referral from your planning office here at Town Hall.
Oh, it comes from us or
Yeah,
them?
it comes from us.
Oh, I didn't know. that. I
Any
thought it
change in
came from-
regulation that potentially could affect other towns gets sent out to the local.
Oh, you didn't get anything yet? Maybe it's just too soon.
I'm not sure we will, but
Oh,
so
right.
far we have not
Well,
gotten.
Bill will be here next.
Yeah, if they-
Rivercog did send something saying they have no impact, but that's
Yeah.
obviously to our east. But we've got nothing from Scrog.
Yeah, it was on the agenda 3/10, March 10th, last Thursday. Okay, to be determined.
So, right, you just educated me about something, but it's not uncommon though, they don't invite us.
Oh, yeah, I
We
didn't
don't
know how
send
it worked. I didn't know.
So, like that letter that came from the Lower Connecticut River Valley one, I think Eric sent me the letter. I didn't even know the meeting had happened. I just know that
Okay.
usually if somebody sends a letter, and if they don't send a letter, like he said, it typically
Somebody
means they don't have any
tells
problem with
someone
it.
something on some day.
Maybe. Also wanting you to know that in drafting and developing the regulation, we did work closely with Mr. Knapp here, who provided us numerous helpful comments on a draft that we showed him. And so we then made several changes and additions to the regulation to accommodate his input. We also worked with Attorney Marjorie Shansky, who's here tonight, and I believe plans to speak in favor of the regulation. Attorney Shansky represents another property owner in North Branford, who I understand would like to make a multifamily housing proposal at some point in the near future. And so, at Eric's good suggestion, we worked together and made sure the regulation worked for both property owners so that you didn't have like competing language or any kind of confusion in that sense. So that was helpful as well. And we also worked with our own team of professionals who have a lot of decades between all of them in engineering, landscape architecture, building architecture, all of that, to make sure the regulation would work. Yeah, I think you will see in the regulation, if you were to look at the housing section of your POCD that I mentioned, we also used a lot of wording from your plan to make it clear that the goal was to have the regulation directly advance the goals that you stated in your plan, which is what zoning is supposed to do. So we tried to do that. Turn to the regulation itself. I'm sure you had a chance to read it. I'm not going to go through it word for word or even line by line, but let me just offer a few words about a few of the sections, and then we're happy to answer any questions you might have about it. First, the purposes, that's the very first section, 39.1. That's an example of what I was just talking about. The purposes, as we listed it, directly tracks and actually adopts language from your POCD, so to make sure we are advancing your goals. 39.2, I think is important because it puts limits on what properties would be eligible for this zone. Now, as you probably know, you, the Planning and Zoning Commission, would decide at whatever point somebody wanted to do this kind of housing. You would decide whether or not to change the zone of the property to this regulation, to this district. And there is no such application before you now. We're only talking about the regulations. So somebody would have to come forward with another application to place this zoning district on their property, and the commission has a great deal of discretion in deciding that application. But in addition to that, we kind of wanted to help you sort of say to the world, there are limits on which properties we will allow here, so that you can have some controls in advance on what kind of applications might come before you. And so before a piece of property can be brought before you to be rezoned to this MFHD, they have to meet the criteria that's listed in 39.2 there. And those came largely from your POCD as well. As Mr. Knapp said in his memo, they provide some fairly strong backstops to what kinds of properties might be eligible. I just want to give you one page from your plan I think is relevant here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is the town's housing plan at page 41 of your Plan of Conservation and Development. And you can see on that plan, you, the commission, identified several priority areas and actually priority sites for multifamily housing. You also, in the little box over here, listed, it's a little small, at least for me, but you listed some multifamily housing priority site criteria, and they are access to sanitary sewer, access to public drinking water, and primary access and egress from a state road. So as you can see in 39.2, we used all of those. Number 3 and 4 there, state highway, public water, and sewer. We also, in number 2, added located in a transitional area between other land uses. And the reason we did that, as I agreed with the way Eric put it in his memo, is to say you can't just build a multifamily housing development in the middle of a residential subdivision. It probably wouldn't be appropriate, if the property was just surrounded entirely 360 degrees by single-family homes. It should be in an area that has a mix of uses, and that's what the planners call a transitional area, because you're sort of in between maybe some more intense uses and the less intense uses of a single-family neighborhood. Rather than just saying that verbally, I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking just for illustrative purposes.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
This is, it's called Existing Conditions, the Pines of Northford. And I'm not trying to focus on one site, but I wanted you to just have a visual example of what we're talking about in this regulation by transitional area. So it's an aerial photograph that includes Mr. Belfanti's property that he talked about. You can see sort of on the left side of the page where it says site. That is the site that we hope to propose to you later for multifamily housing. So to the left of our site is the Honeywell manufacturing facility that I mentioned. So it's an industrial use. Just above our site is the Northford Ice Pavilion that Mr. Belfanti talked about, so a commercial and retail type of use. Then to the right of there is nonprofit-owned open space. And then immediately to the right of our site is another multifamily use, a condominium development. And then along the road on both sides are single-family homes. So this is the kind of site that planners are talking about and that we are talking about in regulation, where we say in a transitional area, because our site where we would like to propose multifamily housing sits right in between the more intense industrial and commercial uses on one side and then the less intense single-family homes on the other side, which is generally viewed as a perfect place for apartments. Sections, the next page of the regulation, 39.4 and 39.5, they talk about the next two steps of applications that somebody would need to make to you, and so hopefully those sections show you that this application is not, for any one particular property. You need to go through two more steps before you can build multifamily housing. You need to apply for a zone change, and then you need to apply for a special permit. And we have provided there in the middle of page 2 some detailed considerations for zone changes. So in addition to the broad discretion that the commission already has, we also listed some specific things, sort of as a guide that you, the commission, would be given to yourselves or giving to a future commission, some considerations in 39.4.2 that you want to look at whenever somebody would come in with a zone change application. So you would ask about and you would think about, does the rezoning accomplish the purposes of the regulation? Is it a suitable location? Will it generate traffic in such an amount to create a hazardous condition? Is the utility service adequate, and will it adversely impact neighboring properties? So again, some guide rails or limitations to help the commission ask the questions later on and decide whether or not you want to approve a rezoning. For the special permit, as I mentioned a little bit ago, we took care to use and to refer to the criteria and the procedures that you already have in place in your regulations. So we didn't try to complicate this and make it its own sort of procedure. It gets processed just like any other special permit or site plan gets processed. Then in section 39.6 on page 3, we have development standards. And so in addition to the general standards that you already have in place for special permits and the Planning and Zoning Commission's discretion that's already there, we've suggested some further limits on what applicants and the commission will do in the future. Now, we understand that some of these parameters may be a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. And Mr. Knapp called out a few of those in his memo, density, building height, some of those things. And I would ask you to please keep in mind, the reality is, in order to attract unsubsidized private sector construction of multifamily housing, towns have found that there needs to be a little bit of give and take on some of these parameters, especially when you have requirements like we were careful to build in for landscaping, landscape buffers around the perimeter of the property, subtracting wetlands and steep slopes from the density calculation. Then if you allow maybe a little bit more density than you're used to doing, That's how a project can get built and be feasible. And as Mr. Forlenza will explain in a minute, what we are proposing for things like density and building height are customary in the multifamily market today, and they are right in line with other developments that Belfonte Companies has built and is building in Connecticut and that have been built in neighboring towns. So we're not proposing to you anything that's out of the ordinary or pushing the envelope. Now, it's also important to keep in mind with regard to these parameters that just because the regulations allow you to go up to a certain number for building height or density or whatever it might be, that doesn't mean the Planning and Zoning Commission must approve the special permit and the site plan that come before you later. Rather, that number and whatever else the applicant is doing, they have to be part of an attractive design that's sensitive to its neighbors and that satisfies all of the criteria. So to try to put that more succinctly, a building might be within the building height limit, but it could be in the wrong place. And so the commission still has the discretion to look at that plan as part of the special permit and say, that doesn't work, you put that right by the setback or whatever it might be. So, so you still have that review that will come later. And that's why we included section 39.7 on design criteria, and because Eric suggested it. But I tried to draw in language again from other places in your regulations where you have a whole subsection here, 39.7 on design, that gives the commission some say over building placement and the architectural design and that sort of thing. So you can look at everything together. And when you do that, you may decide that building height is fine because it's attractive, it's in the middle of the site, it's well landscaped and screened, that sort of thing. Whereas if somebody does it the wrong way, even if it's within the building height limit, you still may not wish to approve it. Last point from me is consistency with the Plan of Conservation and Development. We've talked about it, so I won't go over it at length, but the one thing the commission has to do by state statute is if you approve the regulation, you need to make a finding whether it's consistent with your POCD. I agree with Eric wrote in his memo, pages 1 and 2, that there is support within the POCD for the regulation. You can also see in my letter, I discussed it at pages 2, 3, and 4. And you have 3 particular housing goals in the POCD that I called out in my letter, and business goals as well, that we believe are advanced by our multifamily housing district. So in short, the new district addresses a need called out in the POCD, and it will directly advance several goals that are set forth in the POCD. So therefore, you can find that it is consistent with the POCD. Unless there's questions for me right now, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it to Mark Forlenza.
Questions yet, or do we want to wait until we hear from the whole team?
Why don't we wait? 'Cause I
The whole team?
have a bunch of questions.
I think we all have a bunch of questions, that's just how we are.
Sure, did you give them all the handouts? And you have the answer. Good evening, Madam Chair, and good evening, Commission members. Again, my name is Mark Forlenza, and I'm pleased to be before you presenting the stone change application. We've had some dialogue in the past, at least 2 of us have with ourselves, so thank you for having us back. What Joe Williams has asked me to do tonight is just to cover 2 things that Eric brought up in his memo. 1 was densities, and 2 was building height. So we prepared some handouts for you all to show that the densities that we're proposing in our regulation and the building heights that we propose are sort of consistent with what the multifamily apartment community is doing across the state and actually across the tri-state area. So the first slide, which I will hand out, in our pre-app, I believe we showed this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We were asked to look at some surrounding towns and compare some of their multifamily communities. So these densities in the 3rd column are not actually
regulations, but they're actually densities of something that was actually built. So we looked at Wallingford, we looked at North Haven, Hamden, Branford, and then we listed the density per acre of the community that was actually built, not what the regulation says. So as you're probably aware, sometimes the regulation will allow 20 per acre and 15 per acre actually only gets built. So this is what's actually was built. So in Wallingford, at Parker Place, and these are all fairly new communities, you had above 30 per acre. In North Haven, this community was 30 per acre. Hamden, 24 per acre. Branford, 20 per acre. And in our regulation, there's a little mistake down here. In our regulation, we're proposing 20 per acre, which is consistent with what was built in Cromwell, that I think a couple of you guys have seen. So I think the point that we wanted to make with this slide is our regulation of 20 per acre is consistent with adjacent towns, and not only that, consistent with what the development community sort of requires to build, luxury, multifamily, institutional grade communities. And there's if I made a comment other than the comparisons, there's a reason why these communities need this sort of density and just these sort of absolute numbers. The communities that we propose with this regulation, and many that you see here, they're high-end luxury communities, highly amenitized, with hotel caliber, service and staffing that sort of requires a critical mass to actually get these things built and operated efficiently. So this is sort of sometimes some would say the bare minimum of densities for an institutional grade community. So this is why we propose that sort of density per acre. The second thing that Eric had raised was the building height, which we have proposed at 55 feet. And then I have another handout for you all.
Thank you, sir.
Again, this community you see in the photo is an existing community in Cromwell, Connecticut. And if you flip to the next page, that is the architectural elevation that we had, that we had presented, and the architecture had drew up. And what we did here is actually denote sort of the building height of this building. And this building happens to be the highest building that we have in Cromwell. The other buildings, vary in size. As Joe mentioned, that often happens. We actually have smaller buildings adjacent to other uses, but this happens to be the largest building that we built in Cromwell. So we took the largest one, and we drew the height based upon your height definition, and then we can talk about why we think the 55 feet is a good regulation to have. The actual height of this building is 52 feet to the peak, and you see that scale to the left. And as you can see, I think the highest you have in your current regulations is about 35 feet. But as you can see, the height is often higher than what seems necessary because of the articulation that we have, in the architecture, mainly that one big peak in the front. Each floor is about 10 feet, so we could potentially build a building of 35 feet, but what you would see is 3 stories and sort of a flat roof.
Yeah.
And the architecture just wouldn't come through the way we want it to come through. So that's why we've proposed this as 55 feet. This is the largest building. It's 52 feet. And what it allows us to do is show this articulation, in the roof line. And you see the extra windows that we put in that gable. And we wouldn't be able to put that element in, or the smaller gables, if we had a lesser building height. Because what happens with these gables is it forces the roof to be steeper, which again is a nice architectural design than a flat roof. And that's why we proposed the 55 feet at this community, which again is consistent with other communities. In case people look at other zoning regulations in other communities, you might not see this number only because they define height a little bit differently than what you do here in North Branford. A lot of municipalities use the median elevation of the roof line to measure and the median, and then 5 feet off of the building. And it allows sort of this articulation. So if you look in another zoning regulation in another town, you might see 48 feet. And that's because they're measuring not from the peak, but from the midpoint of the roof line. And that's why if you look across, you'll see a little bit difference. But the buildings, again, are the same buildings. They're everyone's just measuring them just a little bit differently. Thank you, Joe. In addition, we realize that you don't want just a big 55-story building. So part of the regulation we have is a 3-story limitation. So the height and the regulation should be, the height and the story regulation should be looked at together. So, where our proposal says you can't build more than 3 stories, so someone can't use the 55-foot, regulation and then build 5 stories and have flat roofs, because that kind of would fit if you didn't have this story regulation. So both of those should be looked at together, and then we believe you get a nice, articulated building that had that lot of nice features. Not that our building is going to look exactly like this here, it won't. But we wanted to show you a representative example of why we proposed the regulation the way it did. And, thank you again.
Well, we gave you a lot. That's our initial presentation, Madam Chair. Greatly appreciate your patience and your listening carefully, and we respectfully request your approval. But of course, we're glad to answer any questions, respond to comments from the public, etc.
Yep, first we'll bounce the ball back in our court and start our questions.
So let's talk about the illustration, right? So in this particular case, it's almost 52 feet. Is this a living space at the top in this illustration?
There's a loft in that center peak, yes.
Yeah, so what happens is, in some of the apartments, we don't, it's not a story, but what happens is we have a small loft in the back of the apartment that is a stair up to, and which is that window actually allows light to come into the apartment. So it's not a story, but it's a loft within that apartment.
So, and that would still be, this is still considered 3-story?
Yes. Because it's 1/3 of it's at maximum 1/3 of the area below it, so it's not considered a story.
Okay. And then the next component, I have a question on your density. All the area towns are wonderful, but we didn't see anything from North Branford of our current density per acre. In the definition of the POCD is you called it. Excuse me. I got it here for a second. So consideration, one of the bullets that we have in POCD is consideration, right? Consider zoning regs to permit high-density housing development, right? Because we're talking about whether this fits in the POCD or not. So for me to understand it, the members here understand what exactly is high density, and how is it comparative to the current quote-unquote density of the North Branford community areas we have right now. There's several apartment complexes within the town, but that wasn't used in the comparison other than everybody else. I think it would be
Or a town similar to ours.
similar to ours, but I think it would benefit our decision-making on helping us understand what exactly high density is as compared to what currently exists within the town.
You're right, we didn't do that, and I'd be happy to do it.
Okay, that would be great.
Sure.
So one of the other bullets in the POCD is development regulations that permit small-scale multifamily development. In the proposal for the Benefante property, do you consider that to be small-scale multifamily development?
Well, yes, in this sense. Now, that's in the eye of the beholder, of course.
Sure.
And I don't know exactly what the commission meant in writing that. But I will tell you, and I know Mark can confirm it, that at least for what we are looking to do on our site, what would be allowed on a site about 5 or 6 acres like ours is, under this regulation, you can only do an apartment development like we showed you in the density chart of about 120 units. So yeah, actually, believe it or not, that's on the smaller side today of what people are doing for new multifamily developments. We usually see 200 and north of there for units. So it does allow something on the smaller side because it's not a heavy density per acre, and because we build in all these other limitations of subtracting from the developable area, the wetlands, the steep slopes, so you really shrink a lot of the property that's available to apply that number to.
Right, and that number's 20 per acre?
Right, after you make those deductions.
After you make deductions versus 10 per acre. I mean, I think if I look through our regulations, I think our density in any of the regs, there's 5 per acre. And you're asking us to go 4 times that and still meet the POCD under this language of small scale. And then the second component to that line item in the POCD is small scale family development as a component of mixed use. And there's no mixed use proposal here in this particular text amendment, correct?
No, there is. We weren't claiming that part of the POCD.
Okay.
I mean, there are many statements, and I didn't go over them all tonight, but I did in my letter to you. There are many statements in the POCD that we believe we're consistent with, and you have one in particular that says on page 38, consider zoning regulation changes to permit higher density housing development within, it lists a few areas, and then says it, and similar appropriate areas. I mean, that I would commend to you, that we know, and that's why I said to you at the outset, we realize we're proposing a higher density number than you have, and that you're used to having. And it really is necessary to allow a good, newer, higher-end kind of development to go forward. Multifamily requires higher density. But it can be done, and it has been done in a way that is respectful of the setting that it's in. That's why we said you have to be a transitional area. You have to have setbacks, you have to have landscape buffers. The commission will look at the design of the development and the architectural design of the buildings. Is it set up in a way that's going to impact negatively the properties around it? You can do housing of this density in a way that we know the town will find to be very beautiful and attractive and highly functional and a great asset to the town for a long time to come. So I would encourage you, I'm not saying don't look at the number, but I would encourage you, don't focus only on that number, because there's a lot that goes into it. And in approving a certain portion of this regulation or the whole regulation, again, somebody has to come before you and get your approval to rezone the property to that district. Then they have to file an application and show you the whole plan and convince you that it complies with all of your criteria. So even if they're, up near 20 units per acre, have they respected the natural resources on the property? Do they have sufficient landscape buffering? Can they manage stormwater properly? Does it create a traffic impact? There's a whole lot of stuff that the commission has to look at and gets to look at in deciding whether to approve those applications.
I agree with you, but again, it's the perspective of not understanding completely what 20 acres, 20 units per acre looks like as compared to the current layout of some of the apartment complexes in town, to give a perspective to say, oh, that's not too bad, or that's too much.
And
Okay.
I will get you that, sure.
Thank you.
I have to agree, I'm on the fence with this one too. Very pretty, okay? Very pretty picture. But your statistics, have me a little confused. The reg 39.6, item 5, 20 units per acre, minimum 200,000 square feet. So basically, that's 5 acres. That's 100 units per 5 acres. That seems like high density.
Well, if you don't have anything to subtract from it, then it could be.
Yeah, and the the letter from the selectmen of North Haven, I just wish North Branford had 1/10 of its industrial tax base. Okay, the comparisons you gave us, North Haven, Hampton, Wallingford, Branford. I have to agree with Bob. You know, I'd like to see Madison, Guilford, Killingworth, Durham. You know, these are big towns that have a large industrial tax base, and you said there's going to be no impact on the school system, but we're just building a new high school, and we're strapped tax-wise, and you know, crunching some of these numbers, looking at, there's a thing from Honeywell where the average assembly worker is 31 to 46K. Well,
For the salary.
for the salary. A one-bedroom, 1,200?
I don't know if
Yeah, that's
been
about, yeah,
determined. It could
that's
be.
average, trust me on
It
this
could be,
one.
sure.
It's 1,200. That's
Sounds
basically,
low, to be honest with you. A one-bedroom right now is only 1,200?
That's low.
well, maybe I'm low for my apartments, but
Unfortunately,
that's half, that's 50% of their salary. What's the advantage? I mean, you know, we have also a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers in North Branford. Bringing in, you know, a lot of small units with young families are going to put a burden, and how does it really relate to our Board of Education and their budgets and stuff like that? I trust you, but I need to verify.
Sure,
Did someone say that before?
yeah.
I say that all the
Trust and
time.
verify?
Oh, it's verify, okay.
I would just like to agree with both these gentlemen said, and, you know, some of these towns are very hard to kind of compare to Northford. Northford doesn't, like Hamden, Northford, they're not really. North Branford, I'm sorry. Hamden, North Branford, these, especially Wallingford and Hamden, you know, the comparison there is almost like two totally different situations.
Yes.
And your presentation was very detailed, and it was very, you know, you covered a lot of information, but I didn't really get as much statistics and really numbers of, you know, what the actual, you know, hard numbers are in these different towns. And like you were mentioning in some of these other towns like Madison, Guilford, Durham, that are more similar to North Branford. And I would like to see that to compare to those towns.
And we will look to see if we can find any, you know, recent apartment developments of the type that we're talking about. I believe we looked at the towns where we knew they had been approved and built. I'm not sure I'm going to find any in Durham and Guilford, but we will look. And I will certainly look at what's the existing places in North Branford, what is the density there, and we're happy to provide that.
Ron, where did
to
you
your-
get your numbers from about like salary? Is that on a letter?
This is one of the backups.
Page 2 on,
Oh,
what's this
on
from?
that. I'm just gonna share.
Yeah, page 2 right there. Now, is going back to that, do you have an estimate or an idea of when it comes to these units, like the type of, I guess, is demographic the proper word, of the type of people you're trying to capture? I know you said younger families, but is there?
I said younger people, but
Younger people.
let me let Mr. Forletto, he's the expert on
Just
that.
general question, just curious.
Sure, and again, again, we would have been happy to provide all this information to you. We were just trying to, again, we were just trying to stick to sort of the words and the regulation.
Right.
But we're happy to answer a couple of these questions right now. What we propose and what a lot of some of these communities are, and what I have built over my career, are a very special part of the multifamily community. It's what we call renter by choice. It's folks that can afford to buy a home but choose to rent for lifestyle considerations. And we've seen this consistent throughout 20 years, but now it has exploded, especially with COVID. These folks, the market segment that we're talking about comes in three distinct places. The first one is empty nesters, either from this town or an adjacent town. They want to take equity out of their home, they want to downsize, and they want to move to an apartment where they can live with hotel caliber services. So that's sort of the first one. And usually it comes from mainly the town that has the community in it. The second sort of segment is, you know, is young professionals, as Joe said, or millennials, if you want to call them, people that are just coming out of college, people that want to stay here. And it's a lot of the reasons why folks are leaving, like young folks are leaving Connecticut, because they don't have enough job opportunities, don't have enough places to live. And the funny fellow from Honeywell that's here, he's having a hard time attracting people to work in Honeywell, and housing would help that sort of void. So you have young professionals. And the last sort of segment is people in transition, people that are going through a divorce, people that are just having a change of life, people that might be building a new home. This segment is very affluent. At our Cromwell community, the average income is probably 3 weeks ago. The average income was $140,000 a household, and they don't typically have kids, and that's why our proposal here only has 1 and 2 bedrooms. You will not get a family in a 1-bedroom apartment. You just don't. By the time the time they have kids, they're ready to move to a home. And 2 bedrooms don't generate a lot of school-age kids also. And that's not because we're intending that. That's just the statistics. So now we can look at what we built in Cromwell, which was 100 2-bedrooms and 60 1-bedrooms. I think at last count, we had 10 school-age kids in 160 apartment homes. That comes off our demographic report. Something like this community, if you put out the densities and it gets applied to our property, and it is 120 apartment homes, and let's just assume that we've split it 50-50 just for the sake of this conversation. Again, we really didn't want to get into statistics, but we will. The 61 bedrooms will not generate any school-age kids. The 62 bedrooms will generate about 6, because those are the percentages that we get from our statistics from Rutgers and from these adjacent communities also. So what the ratio is you're probably 0% kids for 1-bedrooms and 0.1 for 2-bedrooms, which means for every 2-bedroom for every 100 2-bedrooms, you get about 10 kids. We've actually, and those are the statistics we get from Rutgers, who kind of publishes this national data. We've actually gotten less school-age kids than the national data. So that's that's why when the first selectman of North Haven says it's a fiscal positive, what he's saying is the tax revenues generating from a community like a multifamily community is a lot more than the 6 school-age kids that will come to this community. And we have looked into the capacity of the school, which we can present to you at a different time. But we don't believe there's going to be any significant expense. These luxury communities also take care of their own trash, their own sewer, their own water. We have a staff of 6 to 8 at a variety of different communities. They live there at night. It's kind of full service. We don't get a lot of fire calls, so municipal costs are very small. And school kids are probably the biggest one, and we just don't, multifamily communities just don't generate them. It's funny, I've been doing this for 30 years, and 30 years ago, it was hard for the communities to actually believe that there's no school-age generation for these multifamily communities. But folks in New York and Connecticut have come, that's why you see such an explosion of multifamily communities now. Other than multifamily, there's not many land uses that are popular right now. That's why you see an explosion of multifamily communities. It is a fiscal positive, and it does provide a demand for a town that wants to sort of grow. So those are some facts that we didn't really want to get into with this regulation, but we're happy to talk about whatever you'd like.
It really would be remiss if we didn't talk about the affordable housing component. Literally every piece of data you cited, Counselor, the multifamily housing shortage, the state laws are encouraging multifamily housing. They want to advance the goals of POCD, which includes multifamily housing. Every single one of those bullets that you highlighted, the same could be said for affordable housing. And literally in our POCD, and Bob could read it, it says, put in 20% affordable housing in multifamily zone. Why did you not include that in yours?
I guess there's a couple of reasons. When you look at a development up front, you sort of look at the cost, the benefits, the pro forma, and right now And even though we're proposing this regulation, you do not have a regulation for affordable and inclusive housing, across the zoning. So
Who doesn't? We don't?
yeah, you guys don't. So that's why we sort of didn't include, I know you guys are studying it right now. So when we
No, we're
look-
not studying it. It was studied, it's in there.
Okay, that's fine. So when we look at a community to see if it's economic for us to build, we kind of look to see if the affordable housing is in the zoning currently. And when we looked at this one, even though we're proposing our own, we did not see that. So when we do our economics, we kind of didn't factor it in. And there are other factors in town that make the housing like this very expensive. Sewer hookup fees are exorbitantly expensive, and we have to sort of underwrite those. So there's some other things costs that we're trying to absorb that makes it very difficult in this particular community to actually build the affordable housing in our zone. That's why we didn't propose it.
So 2 points. One, we do have an affordable housing district, so we do have something. And then two, you mentioned the give and take, what they just did in New Haven, because they had to make a law there for affordable housing, because all the places going up weren't including it. They had the give and take, New Haven's different, they have a tax break, but they have the density bonus, which is, what you guys are basically asking. They have the waiving of parking requirements as that give and take, which I know when we considered you guys prior, you wanted us to have less parking. And then in New Haven, they broke it down, you can vary the level of affordability. So yes, it is expensive, but there is that give and take that you mentioned that we need to do, but also to advance the data, saying that there needs to be affordable housing, and in order to advance our goals in our POCD, the give and take needs to go both ways. That if we're giving you the density, and if we give you the waiving the parking requirements, where does our POCD get supported in that one bullet that was completely glossed over?
Yeah, just a couple of things since Marjorie's here too, and she's done a lot of work in New Haven, as have I. The inclusionary houses that are being proposed right now in New Haven came about after 6 years of a lot of multifamily development being developed. So what had happened is New Haven wanted to attract housing downtown, as we think you guys should try to attract some multifamily in your town. And it wasn't until the rents were proven out that people were comfortable actually agreeing to affordable housing. So when nothing is here to comp, and we're making projections about where we think rents are, and there's really nothing to comp to. And so when New Haven did it, originally you were getting your communities approved, and we had one of them. We had one of those communities without affordable housing and with tax breaks and without parking to sort of build these communities. As the communities were developed and the rents were established and the costs were established, that's when New Haven decided a couple things. Once, they reduced the incentives, and two, they started to put some affordable housing in because the development community understood now where the rents were, where the costs were, so it was okay for them to underwrite it as such. This is sort of what I was trying to, even though, Ronald, you kind of smiling at me, because I was stumbling a little there. But this is what I was saying, when you look at a community, you're trying to make sure it's feasible. And that was a great example that you brought up about New Haven, about initially when multifamily was approved and built, there wasn't affordable housing. It got proven out, and then later on the affordable housing regulations, have they been even adopted? They've been
Yeah,
starting-
February
they have?
18th.
It must have been just recent.
Yep, February 18th.
Yeah, so that's when they sort of been put into place. So we're sort of at the beginning of that process here. So I guess that's the best answer that I can give you.
And affordable housing is a bit of a misnomer, I believe, and it used to be called workforce housing, and it says in our POCD, put in affordable housing to support the workforce and the retirement. So it's always an issue, right? People just starting out, a brand new teacher only making $40,000 a year. Parents want their kids to come back to Connecticut, they only make $40,000 a year. A brand new cop, a brand new firefighter, or somebody that retired. You mentioned you want people who are retired. Somebody who's divorced. I'm telling you right now, they can't afford a luxury apartment. So the affordable housing component, which I like using workforce housing better, that need is there, as evidenced, in our POCD. And then who wrote this letter to us?
Let's call it.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Senior Vision.
Yeah.
So it is there. It is it is needed for a variety of people, as well as people who want luxury.
You want
No,
to
I
say
just
something?
want to just make one comment that the luxury property that we're proposing is extremely, extremely high-end. And if it was geared towards affordability or workforce, I think we'd have to take it down a notch or two for it to work. You know, maybe it wouldn't have a swimming pool, maybe it wouldn't have an extensive amenity package, maybe it wouldn't have the staff on site that we're planning on having. It wouldn't have those hotel amenities that we're trying to bring into this community that is in the Cromwell community also. And some of you have seen the Cromwell community, and I'd love to invite you up there and give you a personal tour myself. But it takes, these are very, very expensive to build, and it's difficult to, the affordable units will actually bring down the economics of the project. And I believe that you are looking at different parts of the town for an affordability corridor, from what I've been told. Matter of fact, on Route 80 here, north or east, I guess, past your town hall, there's a corridor that you guys have kind of looked at, and we're going to be exploring possibly building workforce housing in that corridor. So we're sensitive to it, but I think your plan for affordability has not been evolved yet. It might say it in your plan of conservation and development, but it has not been evolved yet. And I know that you as a town are working with other municipalities here around Connecticut to see what the best next step is. So I think we're before that plan, before Northford's plan, and we'd be happy to participate in that plan. We do a lot of business with CHAPA, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, and they have programs geared for workforce and affordable housing, where the financing is very, very attractive. And that's what you need for an affordable housing project. And it'd be nice, and it'll look great, and but it's not going to have this amenitized, you're not going to be able to build this kind of product with affordable housing. And that's the challenge, and that's been our economic challenge.
And I'm not saying make it an affordable housing project, but
No, but
even a
even-
consideration of 10% affordable at 80%. I'm not saying Section 8, I'm not saying 60% AMI. There was just no consideration, and that gives a little cause for pause, because there was no consideration. And again, especially with asking us to increase density, or we,
I
change
just
the
don't
parking.
know if you're going to get anything built, Madam Chair. I just don't know.
Well, that's
And
the problem, which is why New Haven had to pass the law.
I like,
Well, I think, but again, just to reiterate, that's why New Haven didn't do it up front.
Well, and that's why they had to pass the law, because nobody was doing it, and then, the applicants were rushing to get their projects passed before February 18th, because they didn't want to have to fall in after that,
Yeah,
so.
but I guess the point
It's
is,
one
I
of
guess
those,
what I was trying
if
to.
nobody does it, nobody's gonna do it, so why
But-
not
but
make
first
it-
they wanted to
it
see-
falls in,
again,
it falls
people-
in line with our
It-
POCD with this.
I think he made a good point too, that there's some, more information in the future, like you mentioned, that with New Haven, they have years of comps and understanding what apartments go for, versus here in our town, we don't have that back information, so I think you did make a good point with that. Right now, to discuss that aspect of it, I don't think there's enough information to consider that.
Yeah,
That is-
let me jump in here, and maybe just to go off on a little tangent. We're talking units. Are we talking condos, or are we talking rental property?
rentals.
Okay, now, I understand, you're not gonna throw millions of dollars into this investment without making money. It's realistically. And, we're tossing around affordable housing. What's the definition of affordable?
You
At
can
what
make it,
level?
what, it
You know,
could be
is it,
80%.
is
Oh,
it,
yeah.
is it 90, an annual income of 90?
80% of the median household income, and then there's a formula within that.
Yeah,
So
but-
it is a state-defined term. Department of Housing has a
So
state-defined term.
it's not regional, it's across,
The state.
You usually use the statewide median income or the area median income that HUD lists every year.
You could change the
whichever is
percentage as
less.
well.
But
But yeah, you're allowed to put the rules in place that you want to. Under the state statute, that it's one or the other, whichever is less.
Yeah, I mean, affordable could be $100,000 a year annual income. I mean, that's,
Well,
that's affordable.
it's not.
Greenwich it is.
For North Branford, the median income as of 2019, which is 3 years out of date, was $94,000. Therefore, the 80% figure is 70-something thousand dollars. I don't have math off the top of my head.
You're at 80% of median.
At
You're at 80% of the local median.
And again, it varies by family size and bedroom count. There's various calculations that go into it, but I did this for an email that I sent around today. At 80%, the amount you would need to spend on housing to pay 30% of your monthly income would be about $1,800. And that's inclusive of utilities and other things. So that's the number at 80%. At 60%, which is considered very low income, which under 830G you would need to have some component for that, the number comes out to be approximately $1,560, I guess it is. And that's the 60% figure. And again, that's not just for...
And that's for a family of 4 and a half. So then those rents get reduced by family size, which the bedroom size is, that's imputed. So the figures that he was talking about, 80% of the area median is for a family of 4 and a half. But that's just the way it's defined by the state. And the 2-bedroom would be a family of 3, and 1-bedroom would be a family of 1 and a half. It's just the way the calculations are run. So it's less than even what it would be less than even what you're saying.
And again, the 1,800 is inclusive of utilities, insurance, things of that sort as well. So it's not just a mortgage number, there's other things that would go into that potentially as well. So the 1,800 is a little bit deceiving because there's other things that get folded into that number that are considered housing costs. That, again, the goal is to spend no more than 30% of your monthly income before taxes.
So why, I'm always going to need help with the context. Why floating zone versus, I'll ask Eric to help me understand, why floating zone versus like, what's the difference between a floating zone or just a zone? What's a pro or con?
Well, the floating zone concept here is that you're only able to sort of overlay it over certain eligible places in town. And as opposed to a zone change where you can change any place in town to be whatever zone you want it to be. So a floating zone is only eligible in specific locations given the criteria that you have here.
Okay.
Okay? So it gives you a little more control, a little more handle on where in town this could be so that it couldn't necessarily be anywhere. In theory, you can take any spot in town and make it I-1 or R-40 or whatever it is. There's no criteria for doing that beyond that you think it's a good idea or it meets POCD. Under the floating zone concept, you also have these other criteria of it has to be a certain number of acres, it has to be public sewer, it has to be public water, it has to be on a state highway. Otherwise, it's ineligible to have a floating zone landed at that particular location.
I always get confused with that. And where the numbers of, 200,000 square feet, 5 to 10 acres, you guys got that from are those numbers arbitrary? Are they based on other towns or pieces of data?
The 10 acres, I believe I took from another zone, and it was...
In our town?
Yours. I just can't remember which one it was. But it also...
What are the minimum?
It also was of a size that would accommodate my client's property.
It's the elderly housing zone.
Yeah. And the 200,000 square feet came from making sure that this regulation could accommodate the other property that I told you about, so that it's roughly 5 acres, but that property qualifies so that they didn't have to come in and then ask you to amend the regulation if you were to approve it.
The original proposal was 5 acres. The other piece across from Al Rose's is slightly under 5 acres, but if you did it by square feet, because it's an R40 zone, right? If you took the R40 and multiplied it by 5, you can't look for 400,000, which is approximately 5 acres, but still covers the other piece.
And, you know, I know in other applications, we've always said, how many properties does this apply to? Would this apply to? Do we need that data as a commission?
It can be helpful data if you're worried that you're going to sort of overburden your community with these sorts of uses. But again, because this is a floating zone and it's entirely discretionary on you whether to land the floating zone, if you believe you're having too many of these, you can always just refuse to land the next one.
So floating zone, we can say no to.
You can always say no, and if it's entirely legislative, it's entirely at your discretion. So you shouldn't feel that by adopting this regulation that you're putting yourself in a position where you then have to adopt the floating zone and then you have to adopt a special permit. You're given multiple layers here of opportunities to say no if this is not the right location or you think this is being overused. That said, I would suggest that given the numbers of places in town that have sewer and 5 to 10 acre and are in a transitional area, you're probably talking about somewhere between 5 and 10 sites maximum in town, of which I don't know that people would be interested in changing whatever use is there now to whatever this use might be. One of those areas is already in theory going to be your elderly housing site. So I don't know that they're going to rip up their elderly housing proposal and come in with this proposal. So yeah, there are possible locations in town. They have not all been flagged, but it's not every property in town that would be eligible for this. This is a relatively narrow window given all the different criteria we're talking about.
Trish, I got a couple more questions.
Oh, so do I, but go ahead.
Okay, you want to continue?
No, you go.
All right, I'll interrupt your train of thought.
No, go ahead. No, I wrote my questions down, so.
Okay, cool. So on the, back to the text amendment, could you speak to us about why we should consider the impervious surface area ratio be 60%? Most of our ratios in town are 50%.
Sure. We suggested that number partly because we know that the development that we would like to propose will be somewhere in the 50 to 60% impervious range. We also know that we can do that level of impervious surface on a plan that will respect the natural resources on the site, that will stay out of the flood zone, that will have sufficient landscape buffering and screening, and will still be a very attractive development that will not impact its neighborhood, and that we can, and we know this too because we've had the discussion with our engineering firm, we know that we can sufficiently manage and treat stormwater with that. So that level, that impervious surface, now we're talking about everything. That's buildings, sidewalks, parking, pool, clubhouse, you know, if there's a dog run or whatever else it is. So partly with having the additional amenities, that increases the impervious surface a little bit. But we don't foresee having, you know, some of the criteria on the schedule at the back of the regulations looks at the building coverage percentage. We don't foresee having a building coverage that's much out of line with what you have in some of the other zones. But that impervious surface just gives us the flexibility to do some of the things that I was talking about.
Right, I believe the 35% building coverage is in the reg that you're quoting, building coverage on the acre.
Mm-hmm.
The other comment I have is regarding the open space. I'm a little confused on why you're asking us to kind of waive that requirement in our regulation. Basically, you're saying, let's use public space next to us so we don't have to. Kind of, I'll summarize in brief, basically. Could you speak to that so we understand that? That's number 14 on your text amendment.
Sure. And we're not asking you to waive it outright for everybody. We're suggesting that this provision give the commission the flexibility if it finds that the circumstances are such that a particular property will have access to publicly available open space, that you can adjust the requirement for that particular site. Otherwise, the open space provision that you already have in your age-restricted district applies. So the sort of the default is it applies unless somebody can show you that there is access to open space. I mean, they still should show some open space on their property. You know, you have a 60% impervious limit, so you're not going to have a fully built-out site. But we just thought it made sense to enable a project that would advance the town's housing goals, to respect all of the other limitations on density where, you know, the developable area gets subtracted because of wetlands and steep slopes, and you have the landscaping buffers, all of that stuff. And if you have access, which my client's property does that we want to bring before you, where we would have a permanent easement that allows people to walk right into a large area of publicly open space, again, we're asking the commission to at least put a rule in place that will allow you the flexibility to decide if the goals are met in a different way on a particular property than the default rule. Otherwise, the default rule applies.
And what's missing from this particular, you do reference 38.2.3, which I don't recall what that is.
That's the open space requirement that's in the age-restricted district.
The age-restricted district, okay. And I believe, basically in our regulations, we have, if we waive the open space or there isn't available or the town doesn't want to participate, there's a, I believe, a fee for 10%. If you don't meet it, there's a fee for that lack of open space.
That's a subdivision requirement.
Is that a subdivision?
Yeah,
That's not
that's
it?
related to the subdivision.
Okay.
That wouldn't apply here, would it?
Right, that's in the subdivision statute, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know
think
if
that
that's in
would-
this regulation.
It's not. That's
In subdivision,
It's a
okay.
subdivision requirement that if you don't give open space as part of a subdivision, you have to give.
You can make a
fee.
payment in lieu. Yeah.
Why is there even if that's for subdivision, why is it even included in here? Just because it's
Because,
in our POCD?
well, because most commercial, most uses of this sort come with some requirement for open space. as an
Even in other
amenity.
towns?
Huh?
Even in other towns?
Even other towns, yeah. I mean, that ultimately, the goal when you have densities or housing, multifamily of this sort, is that there's some open space component to it. Again, not in every instance, but again, it's in your elderly housing reg as being there, and it's not uncommon elsewhere. Whether it's appropriate in every situation is, I guess, they're saying it may not be appropriate in every situation, and you should have the opportunity to consider that. Whether you believe that to be the case is entirely, that's your call, that's why you're reviewing the regulation.
Out of curiosity, I didn't know there was all this open space over there. Where's the sign I always see, the 32 acres for sale? Where's that compared to all this?
32 is behind the ice.
If you're coming
Oh, back this
towards-
way? Like,
towards the ice pavilion.
yeah, okay.
On the border.
I thought the open space was the 32 acres, but
No, on the town border.
I didn't know that was open
Behind.
space. That's interesting.
East and behind.
I'm bad with those type of directions, and hence the whole I went up. Question that I had that, I think, Ron, you mentioned, I think we had at another meeting, it's always one of those, in hindsight, what does one of the questions I wrote, what does a unit mean? I'm nervous about having unit in there, because is that too vague that? I know they mean apartments, but in terms, again, just to also remind everybody in the audience, the regs is just for the whole town. So it's one of those, it's not just for them, it's for anybody. If I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna build 20 houses on 5 acres. I mean, what does a unit mean?
This regulation does allow.
Does it need to be
We
more
put it in the
spelled out
permit.
or specified? I don't know.
Well, I believe you have a definition in the regs, Madam Chair, of dwelling unit. And what it would mean under this regulation is, the first thing we list under permitted uses is multiple single-family detached dwellings. So it can be small clustered homes. Each one of those is a unit. What we're looking to do, and what Mr. Belfanti has built in other towns, are apartment buildings like you saw a photo of. Each apartment is considered a unit in those buildings.
I just have to
Yeah.
check that.
Basically, if one family is living in it, that's one unit.
Okay, so that can't be misinterpreted, it sounds like.
I don't think so.
I think both Jill and I are pretty confident that you can't misinterpret.
Based on what's
But based on what's in this
The front,
regulation, what's
yeah.
within your definitions, I think we're pretty watertight as far as what we mean by a unit. So, one family per one unit is what we're
Yeah.
talking about, okay?
And then is there, I mean, I read it a few times, but was there a requirement for a traffic study in here, or that's at our discretion?
Well, there is, number one, a requirement that on a zone change application, this is in 39.4.2, the commission will look at, and this is just if you're deciding to, land the zone on a piece of property.
Yeah.
The commission will look at whether the development will generate traffic that will cause a hazardous condition. So that's just on the zone change. But then, I didn't restate in here so that it didn't become
When there's an
25 pages.
application,
Right.
we can ask for a traffic study.
And I didn't restate
That's
all the
right,
special permit criteria in here, but I referred to your other sections that have that. So your special permit criteria, we'll look
That's
at that
what I-
also.
And then another thought I had, when we were talking about 3 stories and the 55 feet, does that need to be expanded or, just more verbiage in there to delineate what, again, just in thinking, because I mean, I agree that we don't want to just say 3 stories and, have shoe boxes. And then what does 55 feet mean? 3 stories, parentheses, 50, again, I'm now looking at this as, a regulation. What is 3 stories versus 55 feet? Again, me not having background in this world is one of those, as a layperson, I was thinking, oh, that just seems like it needs to be spelled out more.
It
But
could-
then, like you said,
it
you
can
have
be.
it there for a good reason to not build 5 stories, go flat. But how do we capture that to 3 stories of livable, but you can go higher for aesthetics? I just feel like that doesn't capture your intention, and this reg doesn't capture that
Can I
intention. So it
add-
seems like it needs to be expanded.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So, I think the first order of business, I think as a commission, we need to decide 3 stories is where we want to stay.
Yeah.
The bigger question is, does 55 feet exceed anything in the town regs that we feel is acceptable?
we have to-
We're at 35 and have been for all of our zones. This one floating zone will be 55 feet.
Mhm.
So we need to decide whether 35 is where we want to stick it, and stick to that,
Yeah.
and have them adjust accordingly, or not at all,
Mhm.
or consider 55 feet or some other form.
Mhm.
So the other consideration I want to bring up to you guys is, we call 3 stories, right? So it's a luxury apartment. Does that mean the apartments are 10-foot ceilings? Or no?
Close to it, 9.
Close to it,
9.
okay. So we wouldn't be opposed to having a 3-story building with 8-foot ceilings.
And then I would come back to you with that wouldn't be a luxury unit anymore, because it doesn't give the
High ceiling.
feel, if you will.
Sure, we agree with you, so you could make it 2 stories with the same appearance, and still
Right.
kind of meet our regulation at 35 feet. So-
I think one thing you all understand, but I'm going to just repeat it, is that you have the unfettered right to reject or to approve any development that's brought to you. If you don't like it, if you don't want to do it, if you think it's too high, or if you, not too high, but if you don't think it conforms and we're not doing a good job and a responsible job as developers, you don't have to accept it. So this is just for the zone change. If you said to me that it has to be 2-story, I would tell you that we're not going to be able to do it. And the project is basically off. And that's not I don't want to draw a line in the sand, but I'm just telling you that economically it's not feasible. If we can't get this amount of units, we're unable to do the project. It's a very thin economical project. It really is thin. I want to address one other thing, and that is the water and sewer hookup fee that you have here in North Branford, which is $12,300 per dwelling unit. And
So that'd be times 1.
that is so outrageous compared to other towns. So our project in Cromwell was $1,600 per unit. Okay, so that's why when you throw out affordable, or you throw out 2 stories, or it's impossible to build. You can't, we can't make it work as
See those
developers.
numbers again, we charge what per
I'm
unit?
sorry, it's 12,300, I believe, is your sewer hookup
Per
fee.
unit.
Per unit. Cromwell is $1,600.
3,000, right.
Three?
It's like an app.
I'm sorry, a new development we're working on is 16. Cromwell was 3. I don't know if this is even working.
It's picking up on the tape, you don't need to back.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
You're good.
Okay, that's.
I wasn't hearing myself. So anyway, back to that, this is, something that, we feel is really important, the heights and the density. If we can't get the heights and the density, well, you can't get the density without the heights. It doesn't work. The other thing is we're surrounded by Honeywell on one side, the ice rink, which we own, on the other side, and Route 22 on the other side. So we're not really interfering, and the condos are really, really set back off where the proposed development is. So we're really not being obstructive to anybody. We're not kind of hurting anyone. It's kind of like, and you're going to have a great, great product that we're going to build, and it'll be a luxury product, and it's a very expensive project, and you'll bring really good people to the town that'll spend economic dollars at the gas pumps in the stores. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Maybe not.
Thank you.
Gas pumps right now, because it's so. No, I'm just kidding.
Just-
Why are ours? Oh no, I've been talking. I'll let you go.
One quick question.
Sure.
Assuming 5 acres, assuming 100 units, and the rumors about our sewer lines in North Branford, do we have the capacity to handle 100 units?
Okay.
We have already.
The short answer is, that's for them to work on with the sewer, with other people. Ultimately, if they can't demonstrate sewer capacity, they can't build it. But it's not the Planning and Zoning Commission's job to figure out sewer capacity. If they're telling you they have it, they need to show you that they have it. But if they don't, then they'll never build it.
But does the onus fall on the town of North Branford to increase the sewer capacity to handle the
No.
the units that are approved for
They
this
need
lot?
to make their peace with whatever
Utilities or anything?
whatever utilities are out there. So they need to go to, whether it's North Haven or Branford or whoever it is, and make their deal to increase capacity to meet whatever needs they have. So it's not going to fall on North Branford to spend North Branford's money. However, that said, the reason that they are having to pay $12,300 is so that when North Branford does need to make improvements, that there is money in the system to do that. So, yeah, you have.
That's my question. Sorry, I was zoning out. It's that expensive because, but on this.
Well,
There are other things. Maybe
I don't have
two.
Victor here to give you the explanation as to why that.
That's fine, but-
I mean, ultimately, the theory was because we have to rent it out from other people, right? That we're sort of at the mercy of whatever neighboring towns want to charge us for these services.
Oh, so that's kind of out of our control.
Right,
So-
we don't have a sewage treatment plant, so
Yes.
we have to pipe everything.
I can address it a little bit. The way the sewer works here is there's an intermunicipal agreement between you and then North Haven. North Haven is the one that has the treatment plant. So the capacity that you're speaking about is what's allowed by North Haven in this intermunicipal agreement. So I think what Michael's saying when he says that we have capacity, and this document is 50 pages long and it's negotiated between towns. So the current capacity in the line that we have to hook into, it peaks and it ebbs. But right now it's at, I forgot the percentage, but it's 60, 78, something like that, it's 70%. And what we were sort of proposing to do, if you wanted to keep that, so you do have capacity, let's say this, you do have capacities for this development within the intermunicipal agreement that you have. What we were proposing was to add to that capacity so we wouldn't have to take up your excess capacity. That's sort of the idea that we had. So, but that's what you're saying when you say, Eric, we have to kind of figure that out. But that eventually has to be figured out.
And again, because of where your town lays, you actually have 3 of these agreements.
Mhm.
One for North Haven, and one for Branford, and one other one
so
there,
that's
because different pieces of town connect to different pieces of the sewer system. So each part of town, Route 17 is on one, and Route 22 is on a different one. And I have a big map on my wall, I can bring it and show you what parts of town are connected to which pieces of it. But again, for each of these systems, whoever comes in with the development rather, has to make their peace with the sewer authority to do that, and also kicks in money to North Branford to make sure that when we have to do certain things, we have the money to do that.
Oh, wow, okay.
Okay? Now, whether we need 12,300 or not, I'll be honest, that is not my level of expertise. I can get Victor in for next meeting and
Yeah,
talk to
I'm
him about
curious
that.
if that's negotiable.
But that, how that works and why we picked that number, well predates me, and again, that's a more engineering issue than it is a planner issue. But certainly, it was not chosen randomly.
Yeah.
How it was chosen, I'll have to have Victor explain.
The development standards, that, you know, just in general, it was both based off your experience and kind of similar to our age-restricted? Is that where they were designed from?
Yes.
This is a
I
holistic question.
took the categories essentially from the age-restricted
Like, for
district.
example, per acre of net lot area, 50%, less 50% of wetlands, slopes greater than 25%. Is that from something else in our regs, or that's what you've designed?
No, I didn't make it up, so I'm just going to check to see if
I don't need to know where, I'm just curious if that's consistent with what else is in our regs, that's all. And what's net lot area mean?
Well, net lot area is once you've taken out these categories that he's talking about that are wetlands and steep slopes.
Oh,
and
okay,
roads.
so the buildable area.
The area, again, it wouldn't be for 5 acres, 100 units unless it's all good land to build on. And in this particular case, they've got a piece of the land that is wetlands, flood zone, not going to be buildable. So even though they're technically 6+ acres, they can only build on 5-something acres of it, and therefore the net acreage is that lesser number.
Okay, so the units per acre is based on, like, the
The
buildable area?
buildable area.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's get back into sewage. No, I was also referring to the physical sewer line. You know, it's my understanding that going down Middletown Avenue, for some reason, they put a 6-inch sewer pipe or something ridiculous.
Large. It's pretty large. I think it's-
Well, whatever it is, if it is not sufficient to put the capacity of whatever they're
Right.
proposing, it is for them to negotiate with the sewer authority to put in
So
something.
the town of North Branford has nothing to do with the physical pipe running down the highway, or?
North Branford eventually will need to negotiate with the sewer authority on use of these pipes. But if the pipe doesn't meet the capacity, it's the sewer authority that is responsible for that pipe. So at some point, the sewer authority may come back to North Branford and say, by the way, you owe us more money because we had to put in a bigger pipe. But that's not the initial cost of having to keep the system up is the sewer authorities, and they will ask money from the applicant to do that. So this is not, it will come out of the applicant's pocket if this needs to be done. Okay?
Do your homework.
No, I mean, just to answer the question, the physical pipe is large enough. It's what's a little bit of a drain is the capacity within that intermunicipal agreement. That you've purchased capacity from various towns, but in this instance, it's from North Haven that we're talking about. And that capacity is, I have to remember, I have to see exactly.
Right, I seem to recall that North Haven was pretty good, but I was thinking, I know on Middletown Avenue, they put a ridiculously small sewer pipe in.
Okay.
And it hinders development.
Yeah, this pipe, this physical pipe that you brought from my recollection is very large.
Okay.
It's the capacity in the words, in the intermunicipal agreement, that you've only purchased a certain amount. But again, this development is still within that amount, but I think when we talked to the authorities, they wanted to keep some capacity in that line for other things, and they didn't want us to be a burden on that capacity, so they were asking us to purchase additional capacity, even though there's capacity within the physical line, and even though there's capacity within the intermunicipal agreement. The percentages, again, I don't remember, but we were offered to purchase additional capacity, so you guys would have that capacity for other land uses as it came apart. Those are the discussions that we have, that this is going 2 years back now, so I have to recall the exact percentages for you. But we can find out easily.
No, that works.
So like the setback numbers that came, is that consistent with our age restricted?
It is.
Okay. Are there any differences?
I don't think so, John. I have
Was
to-
it like a copy and paste?
The age restricted, is actually less. Minimum front is 20 feet, so we provided intentionally a good bit more than that. So we gave 75 feet for the front setback
Okay.
from a state highway, which you have to be on, so it will be the front setback. And it has minimum side and rear 30 feet in the age
Okay.
restricted.
Okay.
So we gave more
A
than
little
that
bit
at
more.
40 feet. And it has, from private street, 20 feet, which I don't think we did that one. So we try to improve upon that a bit
Yeah.
more.
And then the parking,
The parking is based on the change to state statute from last year. That's what the state law provides. You can't require more than one space for a one-bedroom unit or 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom out.
but in a lot of our rigs, we always want more, we always have more parking.
Well, and again, you have a provision in there that allows the developer
Yeah.
to demonstrate that they don't need as much parking as would otherwise be required.
Yeah.
Again, you can always ask for what they are proposing, but if you believe that they have shown the need to have fewer spaces, you're allowed to approve fewer spaces as appropriate. So you don't get an over amount of parking area for a particular
Yeah,
location, okay? I sort of pushed for that piece as well in there to allow for fewer spaces if the commission was demonstrate that can be done.
I know I mentioned this to some people before, but you're some new commission members, so I think it's important to know that we've owned the property for almost 25 years. I think it's 26 actually. And for 26 years, we've been trying to market it. We've had brokers signs. If you drive by it, CBRE, I think, there's a sign out there. Levy Miller Moretz is currently marketing it, and we have had absolutely no bites from anyone. Residential, commercial, nothing. So, we decided to come before you because, not that I'm looking or saying it's a hardship, but in order for this thing to get done, we need to get approved what we proposed. And that's basically what I wanted to say. It could sit there for another 25 years. And there could be, again, any more money on the grand list because it's sitting there for another 25 years. Thanks.
Quick question about the term shall in under 15 amenities. I'm reading shall as there's a requirement to have these. Is that how you mean shall, or?
Yep.
All right.
It's required, yeah. You have to provide amenities such as, it doesn't have to be these things, but that's another thing we were asked to add in here. And
Oh,
you
you were asked to do that?
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that there was a requirement for some amenities. It doesn't, again, as Attorney Williams indicated, you don't need to include each of these. It says shall include amenities such as, so that there will be some level of amenities on site. Okay?
And the reason why I bring it up, because it's one of those, it shouldn't be a requirement to have a pool, because again, if we need to fit the need for multifamily housing, not every multifamily housing needs
And
a
again, you don't have to have a pool, which is, again, I wanted to make sure that there was some amenities on site. So you weren't just
It
getting.
shall be may?
And the hot tub.
Well,
I just get concerned with the use of shall, because often it's taken as a requirement, whereas may is not.
well, I
'Cause
guess
like
the point is, if you get may, then they can come in with no amenities and say, well, we just chose not to.
If
So-
the commission decides to change it to May, Madam Chair, we won't mind.
I-
We're still going
No,
to
meaning
provide.
leaving it open for if you want to make it that, fine, but again, this is going for anything and everything now or in the future. It doesn't, some basics, yeah, trash collection, but it's like, multifamily housing, not everybody needs pool or.
Just a different type of
Right.
housing, Trish, right? Because it shall forces him to put something in there of those listed.
Okay.
Instead of
Yeah.
leaving it floating, he has to do something.
That's fine, I just don't want
Right.
people to get turned off if they think like, I need to put a pool in, but I won't. But obviously, again, I'm more of a layperson when I read these hence the questions and the back and forth. Because, yeah, none of them multifamily housing. Because again, because there's, the qualifying phrase to maintain a high standard of living for its residents. I mean, just because you have these doesn't make it higher or lower. It's just, so that qualifier is like, oh. It's just, in my head, it changes the intention. Like, multifamily housing could contain many things. It should be a high standard of living no matter what. These things don't make it any better or worse. That's all.
Well,
I was a little-
again, as Attorney Williams indicated, if you want to strike that section entirely, I don't.
Yeah,
think
no,
it's-
I know, like, I know how we are, like, we can strike it out, we can put it back,
Yeah, it's
we
fine.
go around and around.
Ultimately, to your reg.
Yeah.
You have to be happy with your reg.
Yeah.
So when you are finished with the process entirely, at the end of the day, you will have three choices. You can approve it as presented, deny it as presented, or modify it to make it
Yeah.
look like what you want it to look like. So feel free to go through and wordsmith it to your satisfaction, to
Yeah.
make it look like what you want it to look like. Because
And
it's
yeah.
ultimately the commission's regulation that you're going to own when it's all done.
Yeah, and I know I'm talking this way, but as you guys know, my thoughts are always like, yeah, it's for, my thoughts are for us, like, do we need that, do we not need that? Is it a little problem and I'm making it, a bigger problem, that's all.
I like shell.
I like shell as well.
I like may, but it's a
No,
democracy.
shell, but, I mean, it's,
I think the minimum.
yeah,
Well,
mail
the
and
number
pickup, come
is
on, that's
anything-
an easy one to cover.
Right.
I think that's all my questions for now. Anybody else, any other questions, thoughts, comments?
Just the open space. So that's an issue. Do we want to consider this as part of future districts where I believe that there's no public available open space is located in the immediate vicinity, then this development shall comply with open space of 2.3. And one of the comments in that section of the open space for the adult age-restricted housing is the commission may accept also a fee in lieu of dedication of open space. So there is a comment in this age-restricted under this section for compensation for lack of open space. And then immediate vicinity, defined as half mile, 10 minutes, next to, adjacent to.
It means whatever you guys think it means. I mean, ultimately, there's no specific definition for immediate vicinity. If you want to create one, if you want to say within 200 linear feet, you can do that. If you don't want to do that, that's up to you. How specific do you want to be? Obviously, immediate vicinity is a vague term. If you think it's too vague, if you're not satisfied with that, then put in a number of linear feet or whatever you think is appropriate.
Okay.
I'm flexible with it, because again, if it's, again, the data supports we need diverse housing, so, it being flexible, but I agree with the whole, maybe it needs to be defined more.
Right, then my other comment is the lighting, right? Because 41.2.11 refers to both sketches 6 and 7, again, subject to it's our discretion what it should look like. And obviously, those sketches are kind of outdated, in our opinion.
We're going to need to work on getting those updated, for sure. But I'm not sure we have anything else to point to right now, so I think we need to point this reg in that direction, and then we need to go back and change what those sketches look like.
Would it be more appropriate if the comment was relative to the appearance of the complex? The age-restricted district has different lighting than what's on our spec, but doesn't really refer to it in our regs, as are different properties throughout North Branford that refer to sketches 6 and 7, but really came up with a site development plan and we approved whatever that lighting was, not pigeonholed to sketches 6 and 7. Right, so.
If you would like them to make it look like a senior housing for purposes of the lighting, that's up to you folks. I'm guessing they would probably do that if you asked. up to you how you want to handle that.
Okay, how should we make the recommendation? What we wanted to say, or
It's your
offer
right.
them to come back with us with different language to reflect?
Well, ultimately, it's going to be your right. So you can certainly tell them you're looking at making it this way when you're willing to come back and propose it, and hold the hearing open and see what they come back with in 2 weeks. But ultimately, even if they don't propose it, if that's what you want to adopt, you can always adopt it to say whatever you want, right? I mean, even if they didn't like it, it's your right. So you can do it by saying, please come back with other alternative language, or you can just say, this is the language we want to use. Up to you how you want to play it. It
Okay.
sounds like the hearing is being kept open to allow them to come back and address raised concerns. If you want them to come back in 2 weeks with different lighting language that more tracks to your housing lighting language, that's certainly something you can propose to them to do and see what they come back with in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that's helpful direction to us. I mean, I'm happy to work on that. Are you talking about in the age-restricted district or somewhere else when you said senior?
It was the
I'm using senior as the age restricted, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm just looking for it. I didn't see it.
And it wouldn't be there. The lighting on that, I don't know if it's in that one, but 41.2 is the lighting regs, right? And in that is high-pressure sodium and all the other stuff, which, you know, we wouldn't want you to install that. It's not any efficient, and you're going to do that in your site plan. But I think it would be beneficial for us if you rewrite Section 11, the lighting, to incorporate a more appropriate lighting fixtures that would fit the complex, rather than what we have in our regulations,
Oh, okay.
and modernize it.
Just give it a
Or
broad
we did
statement.
already, or you want it in section 41.
In section,
No,
in
We're
11.
saying that instead of using this reg to refer to 41.
Just write our own?
To write your own based on,
That's fine.
okay?
Say that again, appropriate lighting fixtures. I like what you said.
Appropriate lighting fixtures that would accent the property, right, or the development, or something along those lines. That if it's going to be a luxury, you're not going to put, you know, streetlights out there.
Sure.
It's going to be something that, so an example would be the age-appropriate housing. That's been used similar throughout Northford, at least. So, I mean, we will, and then again, you're in Northford, so anything of the country to kind of bring in the atmosphere of the town would be appropriate, I think. So if you could do that for Section 11. In addition to that, obviously, we're coming back. So if you could do us a favor, at least from my perspective, back to the building height of 55 feet. I understand your point that you're pigeonholing us into this reg and that height. So I would ask to do an evaluation of the town and demonstrate where in the heights that you feel we would be more comfortable accepting 55 feet versus 35 feet. So we have perspective versus it's 55 feet, and we haven't been to Cromwell, and we don't live in Cromwell, and they'll drive by it, but we also drive all around town so we can see the different places in town to give us a better perspective.
How tall is the, when you're going down 22 going from Northford, from Niss to North Haven across the train tracks, how tall are those, is that 55 and over there?
I think that's.
It's 3 stories, but
I
then.
noticed those two. I think one was age restricted and one was 3 stories. And I noticed that as I was driving in, I thought that I should have done.
I'm bad at visual
But I
spatial.
will.
And that might help us plenty, enough of us,
If
Steve.
you look at the ones on Route 5, the flats in North Haven, you know, they're 3-story, that's across from where the Range
Yeah.
Rover dealer is. But they're flat, it's 4, isn't it? But they're flat roofs. So, you know, you can see that it's not as attractive.
You got my vote already.
No, so what we can do is,
Yeah.
Yeah, it
You know,
looks like
you could say flat roof, but
It look-
it's not gonna fly, you know, we're looking more colonial New England
Yeah,
as
and-
opposed to, you know, Co-op City.
I think those are 3 stories, but I don't think they're flat. I'll pay
So
attention.
It's
that-
like to
You're
me
right.
in Cromwell.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Those are 3 stories.
But they're not flat, they're
not flat,
attractive.
And then we can take a picture of North Haven too, so we can
Yeah, because plenty of us drive that way, so.
I mean, at 55 feet, you can say that this is 3-story, but we know there's a loft there, so is it really
Correct.
3-story?
Yeah,
Is that
I-
disingenuous
yeah,
to the
hence
fact that it's, oh,
expanding that.
3-story, but I use a loft in the 4th level?
which is-
And then we have a
it's
roof
4
over it.
stories.
And then we have a roof over it, so that's not really 3 stories in my opinion, but that's just me.
Any other questions or comments before we open up the public hearing?
Yeah, I have a question, and yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. I understand what you're saying about the open space, right next door. And legally, if I put up a development and I had to give, let's say, 5 acres for open space, and you own the adjoining property, and you want to build, 100 units tight to the border and access what I had to give up, is there a legality or a discriminatory type of thing where I had to give up 5 acres of land and the other person didn't, and the other person is going to access the land that I had to give up, but it's open space, and once you give it up, it's the town's? So I'm bouncing around in my head.
I
You don't
think.
necessarily make it publicly available, though. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, I think discriminatory is sort of a loaded term. Are you subject to legal liability on this sort of thing? I'm not an attorney anymore, I'm not gonna give you a legal answer, but I will say, ultimately, each application has to be judged on its own merits. And in this particular case, what they're telling you is, if you think a site has around it enough publicly available open space, it may not be required that this site also give open space. That's really the only thing that this reg is saying, that every site may not require new open space. If there's already open space around it that you believe is adequate, then you can take that into consideration in making your decision here.
So I hear what you're saying. Each decision is,
It is
stands on its own merit.
Yes, it does.
Okay, once it's decided on, and the open space becomes part of the town or the land trust or whatever, that's done, and the next one will be taken on its own merit if it includes it.
Yes.
That's-
What I would say is that simply because somebody else in their circumstance had to give open space doesn't mean that everybody else necessarily will, because their circumstance needs to be evaluated on its own merits. Okay?
Where were the permitted uses taken from? Somewhere else in our regs, or that's just kind of a script? And the reason why I ask is, this is a multifamily housing district, and again, we're trying to provide more diverse housing. I'm thinking, if I live there, do I want somebody running a business next to me?
Well, remember, it's home occupation, so it's only gonna be a business in the sense that I would be able to have my accounting office or something. Yeah. So I could do something out of my second bedroom, that's my quote-unquote
Gotcha.
business. This is not, they're not gonna be able to run a dentist's office there, they're not gonna be
Okay.
able to run a retail office there. This is
Oh, all
something,
right.
this is home occupation, typical home occupation stuff.
helps.
Okay, does that help?
Yes.
Yep, and those did come from other places in your
Right.
regulations. But yeah, and it was also meant to reflect the reality today where, some people are
Yes. Working
running
from
an
home.
internet thing or something out of their
Yeah.
apartment, they're allowed to do that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we open it up to the?
Yeah, last one, could you, back to the open space, could you look at rewording that section relative to
Vicinity part?
availability to accessible, publicly accessible? There's a little difference because availability could be wherever, and we've had in a situation where we didn't have public access to open space. It was available, but there was no access. So in that case, that's when the fee comes into play.
Yep, that's a good point.
And I would say, instead of immediate vicinity, adjacent to or close proximity might be more appropriate than immediately in immediate vicinity. So those two comments, if you could make that modification.
Sure. Can do.
Anything else?
What's close proximity mean?
I was thinking, I'm not gonna say we'll be here for like
Same
another
thing
5 hours.
as, a little different.
No, how many, 5 miles?
Adjacent
Oh, okay.
to or backslash.
Well, I'm not sure you're getting much
Adjacent.
better.
Yeah, once it's in there, it's done.
Right.
Any other questions or comments before we open it up? All right,
Okay, thank you,
before
sorry.
we open it up for public comment, just a reminder that what you're commenting on is an application for an amendment to the regulations. There is no application submitted for building anything, it's just about the regulations. And again, you're directing your comments or your questions to us. The applicant will take notes and answer and respond at the end. With that said, we open it up. Again, please state your name and address.
Cliff Potter, 1251 Middletown Avenue. I have a general question. You guys have had so many questions tonight, so many what-ifs. Would there be some way that you could maybe grasp this better if these gentlemen met with a couple of you representatives in a joint meeting with Eric, so that, I mean, you're proposing close by, there's too many variables that you're asking these guys to address, and then when they come back, these variables still might not be what you want. But if you had like a joint, I don't know, because it is a text amendment change, is that something that would help you get through this? I mean, I was watching from home and I felt that you were protecting my interest, but I also want to see industry grow in our town, and I thought the balance was leaning the wrong way a couple times. Good questions, but very hypothetical questions that somehow you're going to ask these gentlemen to come up with, and I don't know if you're going to be happy with their answers. Could there be and again, I don't know if this is possible, but some way where you could not have to do it on public TV, but just ask the hard questions you want answered, and right then and there ask them to come back, rather than, they've got a pad full of questions that they have to get answers to for you, and it's only about a text amendment change, and you're going pretty deep just for a text amendment change. And I agree that it's something new and you want answers, but at the same time, I'm afraid in 2 weeks, they've looked up something that you're not going to be happy with. So I want balance in town. I want an industry that'll help my taxes. I want you to do a good job and protect the planning and zoning agendas and stuff. But I also want to see cooperation. Is that too much to ask? I just don't know. I'm in favor of everybody, and I just thought maybe a subcommittee, because it is a new project. It's something I think our town needs to move forward. And unfortunately, our town has a history of being not business friendly, and we got to get rid of that, and we got to get business in town. So I've always found anytime you got conflict, if you meet, you can, little problems don't become big ones. And that's just my suggestion. If it's something you can do, because you've asked a lot just for a text amendment change. And I think you're going, look, they don't have to give you any building plans yet or anything. They're just trying to get a text amendment change. But they're willingly looking up stuff and willing to give you answers. So that's, I don't know, I hope I'm not out of line, but that's just what I'd like to see happen. If it would make it easier on everybody, it wouldn't slow them down. Your questions would be answered immediately before maybe you got to the next public hearing. And it would make your lives easier. Just a thought. Thanks.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks. Name and address.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Attorney Marjorie Shansky. My office is at 61 East Grand Avenue in New Haven in the Quinnipiac River Historic District. And I represent 28 North Branford Road LLC, a property owner in North Branford who has a parcel that would be eligible for a multifamily development were the Commission to adopt this regulation. I have also been a land use lawyer for approximately 100 years. Or that's what it felt like tonight. No, but it is 37 years, which is a righteous long time. And I don't like to be redundant or unoriginal, but Attorney Williams did such a thorough job of articulating the legal basis for a zone change, a text change, and such a good job in his analysis of the Plan of Conservation and Development that I am forced to simply say some things that you may have already heard this evening. Diversification of the housing portfolio in North Branford is indeed captured in the Plan of Conservation and Development, but it is also such an issue of the moment because the prevalence of single-family housing in North Branford and in Connecticut has created where we find ourselves as a state with a housing market that is foreclosed from people gaining access to it. The issue of brain drain has been in the news for a number of years, perhaps even a generation. And anecdotally, I teach at the Yale School of the Environment, which used to be called the Yale School of Forestry, but they changed the name. And when I started there about 15 years ago, the primary interest of the students was to talk about climate change, sea level rise. But for the last 4 or 5 years, and these are all graduate students, they've all been out in the world before they came back to school, they want to talk about housing. They want to talk about housing from a sustainability perspective. They want to talk about housing from an environmental justice perspective. And they want to talk about access to housing. And the fact that from a sustainability perspective, forest fragmentation, the abolishment of biodiversity trails, the single-family subdivision is one of the great villains in climate change, in greenhouse gas emissions, in infrastructure, imperviousness, too much dependency on cars. And the antidote is multifamily housing. The density associated with multifamily housing is good for the environment. And it's good for Connecticut because we have generations who have left the state frustrated by their ability to find a place to live. And I will also say, as somebody aging in place this evening, that multifamily housing also offers an opportunity to downsize and to be still in one's community. Now, I got last year approved 147 units in Branford on 7 acres. I believe that's more than 20 units per acre. It's adjacent to the train station. It has a bit of mixed-use commercial development in it, but it is highly walkable. It's walkable to the center city. The description of where your developments, as you know, sort of your foray into multifamily housing, don't have the same distance characteristics, but the regulation has been so carefully drafted as a transition zone that it really makes sense. It makes sense for you from an economic perspective, from a commercial perspective, and to provide much needed housing for the community. The regulation, which you've done an excellent job of parsing this evening and putting Mr. Williams to his work, retains so much commission discretion that one really has to separate the idea of the text amendment as a text amendment from its operational use. Because, first of all, as a floating zone, it is only a text amendment. Nothing on the ground changes in the town of North Branford as a result of adopting the regulation. So it's only when somebody tries to land the floating zone that you get to make the map change that creates the district. That's a legislative act. You have the broadest discretion. Thumbs up, thumbs down, it's yours to decide. So nothing changes by mere adoption, except you are opening a door that we need to have open to supply housing for many, many people and for economic development in North Branford. And then for the actual special permit, you have, again, all of the discretion that is reposed in a commission on that decision. So this gives nothing away. It does, however, create a kind of an invitation to a developer to be able to satisfy a marketplace that has needs. Now, I want to say, I want to go back to my Branford development. There's not a unit of affordable housing in it. But the developer agreed to make a contribution to Branford's Housing Trust Fund for affordable housing. New Haven has adopted just now an inclusionary zoning regulation. It is flawed. It needs to be amended before it can even become operational. It went live on February 18th, but it's unusable. But New Haven doesn't have to worry about affordable housing in the same way that many communities do, because New Haven is immune from 830G. There's 29-point-something% affordable housing in New Haven organically. And all of the thousands of units that New Haven has approved in the last couple of years, many of which are under construction, not a single affordable unit. City didn't ask for them, nobody offered them. That's sad, really. But that's the reality. So there are many options here. The commission has the ability to amend what's been offered to you in ways that make it reflect more naturally what your intentions are. But on behalf of my client, who is very eager to bring a multifamily development to this commission, we urge its adoption as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dick Bauer. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Honeywell Fire Systems. Our office is at 12 Clintonville Road. I live in Killingworth. I've been with the business working out of that facility for 17 years. And I just would like to speak to some of the need as a business in the local area, and understanding this is about the application, not about the facility next door. There's a letter from us supporting that. But really 3 types of demographics or 3 things that are attractive to us for this type of housing. Number 1, this is our headquarters for fire safety in the Americas. So we have all functions under that roof, whether it's engineering, marketing, manufacturing, quality procurement, technical support. So we are often bringing people in from all over the country to learn our business. And that's a 1 to 2 year cycle. We have an internship program where me as a manager, I bring an intern in for the summer, and I'm measured on my ability to recruit that person to come back to Honeywell after they graduate 6 months after they come to us. So we're gonna have 6 to 10 in the facility this summer. We have over 100 engineers in the site. We primarily bring engineers in, and those folks will stay with us for maybe a year or 2. And then they're gonna go to Atlanta or Charlotte or Phoenix, wherever we go from there. They're going to stay with us, learn the business, and then they want to move on and stay with Honeywell. So it just really fits this very well. Recent college graduate looking to get into the business, learn the business, and then they move on. The second piece is really, we have a lot of executives, I have probably my 12th new boss in 17 years. It started this week. He will be coming down here. He's going to want an apartment. He lives in Atlanta. He will likely get an apartment here in the area because he's going to split his time between Atlanta and here. So we talked earlier a little bit about demographics. That's the kind of folks that we're looking that's appealing to us as a business, is that we're able to recruit and retain top talent, bring them into our facility, give them somewhere local. And you could say, well, would they want to live next door? Would they want to live in the same town? Think about what they do on the weekends. I had a college intern last year. On the weekends, they're going to Boston, they're going to New York, they're going to meet their friends in Newport or wherever. I hate to say it, they're not going to hang around North Branford most weekends. Sorry if I offend anybody, but it's a great place to have a base out of. So, being in the same town that they work in, I don't see that as a detriment. They want to be able to commute, get to work, get home, and then on the weekends, get the heck out of here. So we support this, whether it's next door or in the community. We have a need. We have over 650 people there, and again, it is our headquarters. We're recruiting, it's an engineering center of excellence for us, and I feel this would be very beneficial to our business from a recruitment and a retention perspective to have this available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commission, my name is Ryan Casey. I'm at 491 Tucket, obviously not Branford. I wasn't really coming here tonight to actually talk about this moment, but it kind of pertains to my situation. I'm a realtor with William Ravis with the One Team, and I've been a realtor for 4 years, and I just noticed, especially, well, the whole state is having a huge inventory issue, and that's why you're seeing the rise in prices, right? Because I see it, a house comes on anywhere in the state right now, it's going $40,000, $70,000 over asking price. And then for some reason it appraises. I'm not going to get into that. But the problem that we're seeing now is in the comps come, and I have people, I'm 31 years old, don't let the note here fool you. I have a lot of people my age, younger, and they're just getting priced out, right? Granted, the interest rates are low, that every $10,000 is about maybe $45 to $50 more a month. Not a big deal. But I have people that are putting in offers and they cannot win. I'm like, they're not coming close. So, and it's interesting because I'll be doing close to my 100th deal in 4 years doing real estate, and I'm a Zillow Premier agent, which means they send me all over the place. I closed one in Colebrook, Ansonia, Guilford, so I'm close to 100, and believe it or not, I have never sold a house in North Branford. I've never done a deal at North Branford. And I'm a good agent, just as my mother, don't be fooled. And so it's interesting because I moved here 4 years ago. My wife's originally from Guilford, and I love this town. And we just built our house right off Tucket. It's that new development. And I have a lot of people that want to move here to North Branford. I always talk about it. A lot of people from Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York. We're dealing with a lot of New York buyers. And I call my builder and say, hey, let's build, let's do something. You know, I won't name the builder. And he's like, I'm booked. And I have no place for these people to go. So my situation right now, and I'll be talking about it later, is that I have a family member I know we talked about the demographic, who is going through a divorce. He lives in North Branford, and unfortunately he's going to have to figure out something soon because the prices keep going up. Probably can't stay in North Branford, so I'm pushing hopefully for an in-law, attached, detached, we'll talk about that later. But just from a guy who's more maybe in the trenches, and I'm seeing these buyers and what's going on right now, it is extremely, extremely difficult. And it could just be a coincidence. There's thousands of realtors out there, but for some reason, I just could never, I never get people to come here. And I always pick up my daughter from Twin Lakes, and when I come back down, I'm like, where can they build? Because I love the farms. I mean, we built our house on a farm, but I'm like, I love the beauty of it, but where else can it go? So I just wanted to give you my input tonight because it did pertain to my situation, because if this in-law, my proposal doesn't work, he's got to start looking somewhere else, and he can't compete with these prices. So really, it's an inventory issue. If you get a little breath and there's more inventory that can come on to North Branford, you can start sending more people, because the way I look at it and the way the numbers, and everything can change, I don't see these numbers changing for quite some time, unless something changes with the interest rate, and people are just going to keep getting bid out. I mean, you probably heard the stories, right? Like, and then now that's why the rent's so high, right? I just had to raise my rent. I went from $300 to $1,500. Well, now I have people who still my age are they can't rent, so now they're going in other towns where it's cheaper, and that's where they start to leave. And that's kind of like the process I've been seeing really since 5 months after COVID, and I don't see that slowing down. So I just want to throw my input there. I didn't really have a question, but just wanted to let you know what I'm seeing. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Hi, Kathy Rajunas, 60 Clintonville Road. I lived in North Branford since 1985. And let me give you a little bit of history here. This parcel of land, beautiful parcel of land, the one side of the land to the east is not the condo unit. It is a single house that their land runs from Clintonville Road to the Ice Pavilion. So on the east is not the condos. I live in the condos. And we have a 7-acre parcel of land with 13 condos. So it's not a huge setting there, and most people don't even know we exist because we're set so far back and we're surrounded by trees. So just to give you a little bit of more history about that parcel of land. And also I'd like to give you a little bit of history about the text amendment. I believe it's called Section 38, the floating zone. This developer came here a couple of years ago, and you approved that text amendment. That 6-acre parcel of land that is also wetlands was originally R40. So this just happened a couple of years ago, that it turned into this age-restricted 55 and older. It was never the Section 8 text amendment, 38, I mean. It was R40. 5 to 6 houses on 6 acres of land. Now they want to build 100, 120 units on that same parcel of land that was only to have 5 to 6 units. That's, to me, it's a little bit outrageous. So I also want to talk a little bit, because I know it's all written here in the letter to you, about traffic. Because I do want you to realize that even though this is Clintonville Road and it's a state road, if you are coming east or west down that road, the road narrows on both ends of where that parcel of land will be, because there's a little bridge where water runs underneath. That road, Clintonville Road, narrows both to the east and the west because of that bridge. There is no room to walk on that road. So even though that is a state road, it's at that point, at that juncture, it's very narrow. School buses utilize Honeywell to turn around. In particular, and I'm sure Mr. Frieda from North Haven knows this, North Haven buses, school buses, turn around in that parking lot all the time, picking up their school-aged children. So if you're adding in this 120 unit apartment complex, it's going to be difficult for these to pick up and drop off these school children. Also, one thing that wasn't mentioned at all, our fire department. You compare us to Hamden, New Haven, Wallingford, North Haven, Branford. They all have a paid fire department. We are so fortunate in this town to have the volunteers that we have. We are so fortunate. So now you're taking a parcel of land that should have been 5 to 6 homes, and you're putting 120 units. Think about the added responsibility on our volunteers. Incredible. Also remember that we have 1 ambulance manned 24/7 by 2 volunteers. When that ambulance is out, they have to do a couple of things. Either number 1, volunteers have to go, get the ambulance, and then go to their call. Or we have to get the ambulance AMR from New Haven. So I really, really want you to think, if we're building up the town this much, what are we going to do for a fire department? If you want to turn our town into a North Haven, Wallingford, Branford, Hamden, New Haven, they're not going to be able to do it. They're volunteers. You can't expect them to do that. Also, when you're comparing us to these towns who have these apartment buildings, think about their crime rate. Think about how much crime they have going in on these towns. You'll see them in the news. You won't see that in North Branford. School enrollment, they mentioned this in the letter, how our school enrollment went down 23%. And this is how they want to attract the younger people. So I don't know how their plans for this apartment building is going to do anything with our school enrollment. I do know that when they compare the years of 2007, 2008 to present day, how it went down, they might not have remembered that during those years of 2000 and 2008, there was a bubble in town. So 10 years before, the numbers were 23% less, just like they are 10 years after. And that during that years of 2007 and 2008, we had outrageous classroom size, 28 kids in a classroom. No one wants that. Also, we're talking about being respectful of surrounding areas in the neighborhoods. I do want you to know that I downsized. I used to live on Gale Drive. I now live on Clintonville Road, and I moved there about 11 years ago. So I was able to find something affordable in our town. But also I want you to know that the government changes all the time. And FEMA just came in a couple of years ago. And what I once bought is now considered wetlands. So now we, as a development, need to buy flood insurance. And I don't know about you, but if you have to buy flood insurance, it's a lot of money. So the environment does change with the addition of new buildings. And if you're covering more land than what the town wants you to cover, that means that we're going to have more floodlands. Because I live in North Branford, in the Northford section, I just want to give you a little bit of personal history. I moved to this town because it's a rural farming town. I stay here because I love the feel of this town. I love the ambiance, and I downsized to this town because of the same thing. And I think people move here, and the reason why you don't see a lot of houses up for sale or they move quickly is because people want this. They want to get away from the hustle and bustle. This is why we should keep North Branford, Northford section, similar to what it is, and keep within the present zoning laws. I also want to say about young professionals, how they want to attract the young professionals. I raised a family here. My daughter has a home here. Her friends, her classmates, they stay here. Why do they stay here? It's because of what we stand for as a town. We want to maintain our farming history. We want to maintain the feel of this town. As a matter of fact, the same parcel of land that we're speaking about, when I first moved here in 1985, I used to buy vegetables from the woman who lives in the house on that land because it was farmed. I would also like to say something about the letters of support you received from Brook and Whittle and Honeywell. Brook and Whittle, their main office is not in North Branford, it's in Guilford. So, I don't know if they have any of these apartment complexes in Guilford, but when I looked on the website for job opportunities. There was 6 of them in Guilford and only 2 of them in North Branford. The people at Honeywell, the workers there, I think the majority of them could not afford to live in these apartments that are being built. Even the interns that come during the year, the newly graduated engineers would not be able to afford these units. But all in all, I thank you for listening to me. I am one of the people that you're listening to that actually live in this town, and I love this town, and I would like you to maintain the feel, the ambiance, the reason why we're still living here, the reason why our kids are buying here, the reason why we're retaining our graduates, and they're also purchasing home or even buying homes from their parents because of this town. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't think there is anybody else.
Tricia, I just have a quick question.
Just come up to the mic and state your
Sure.
name and address
Yeah.
again, Cliff. You know the routine.
This meeting tonight's not listed on the town webpage. I had to email Eric to see if there was a meeting, and then I also had to email him for the agenda. So I think you don't have a lot of people in the audience because it's not where it usually is, where the town council's listed and everything. You know, on the webpage on the left side, you go down, you get the agendas, you put the year, the day. If you do that and you put in today's date, there's nothing there. Are you going to keep the public hearing open? Because I, like I say, that's kind of a big enough thing right there where nobody knew about it. Not through the normal channels, let's put it that way. Because town council pops up there, and you can get the town council agenda. If you go on your phone and try it, you'll see there's nothing there.
All right, we'll double check next time.
So, you know, if possible, if you can, keep the public hearing open. Thank you.
Sorry. Just to expand on that, it would be really nice, and I think I spoke to Eric a couple weeks ago, these little blurbs that you put in the paper about text amendment, and it is so difficult to understand. I had a hard time understanding it, but I'm anal. I read the paper from, you know, front to back all the time and everything in it. And I don't think the public really knew about it. When I talked to my neighbor who lives in the house that abuts this property, she had no idea this was happening tonight. So I suggested maybe when you are doing a text amendment that might be difficult for the average citizen to understand, maybe you could write a little blurb in the Tutucket Times so that we could understand what's going on in this town. I think that would be wonderful. That maybe you'd have more people coming out and giving their input, whether it's in favor of something or against. But I didn't understand it, and as a matter of fact, a couple of people in my condo did not know this meeting was tonight. They thought it was the 27th. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's listed on the calendar, planning on March 17th. Check the website.
Our office is just responsible for putting it out and giving it to the town clerk. Whether it gets on the website or not, it's sort of a different piece of the puzzle that we certainly follow up on.
Any additional comments?
Well, I would suggest it's probably a good idea to keep the hearing open, if you're so inclined, Madam Chair. I mean, we have some things we agreed to work on. I'm actually concerned going 2 weeks might be a bit of a mad scramble given the assignments that we were given. So we're going to have to do a lot of homework and research and traveling around to different things. And I prefer if we can not to just show up with it, but to try to submit stuff ahead of time so the commissioners can read it.
Yep.
So I think it would make sense to go over 2 meetings if you don't mind.
What does that?
That would be 21st of April.
Sounds like a
Let's do it
plan.
before first.
Good to go.
All right, can I have
Except,
anything else?
I'm gonna be away that night.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be away for like 9 days in that time period. I hadn't looked ahead to the dates. Should we ask for the 2 weeks and then just try to make that?
yeah.
Can I go back to 2 weeks?
4/7, okay, which would be actually 3 weeks technically, because there's an extra Thursday in the month of March.
So what day would that
It would be the 7th of April.
Whatever works best. Can we have a motion to keep the public hearing open to the next meeting on April 7th?
I motion it.
Go ahead.
To keep it open till 7?
Second?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, passes 4-0.
Thank you.
So were we good for the 7th of April?
April 7th.
April 7th.
Yes.
Yes.
Because once I type it in, it's done.
It's official.
You can't do anything else, go
Yeah,
anywhere
I-
else.
We just call the meeting back to order. We don't need a motion, right?
No, you should say we're
Okay,
back
the
from
meeting,
adjournment, okay?
back from adjournment, back in session. All right, there's no new business, no old business, no other business. Or wait, is there other business?
No, there's
For
no
this
other business.
gentleman?
We'll get to him under my town planner's report. This is, we talked about this last month with the
Correct.
accessory apartments, and I brought in what I emailed out to you folks, just so you can see. We'll take my way of comparison. We'll get to him in just a second.
So under town planners report, we
Okay.
have,
We have no new applications, so we're gonna skip over that. POCD review, that's, you have tonight, I handed out the agenda for next Thursday, where we're meeting with Economic
Yes.
Development Commission. Okay, originally, we were getting someone from the firm that was doing the original plan. I had a Zoom meeting with him Tuesday for half an hour to set this up. He called me up Wednesday morning and said, oops, I've been fired, I'm not gonna be there. So, at the moment, the agenda says I'm leading the discussion. We're still trying to get someone else from his firm to be there next Thursday. We'll see how that turns out. But again, Roger and I put this together, and we will set forth priorities, when we're basically reviewing where we are with the POCD and setting forth priorities as to what we want to do going forward. So that's next Thursday.
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Town managers.
Town managers conference room, which is over there, okay?
Okay.
okay.
Next, affordable housing plan. I have been working with Eugene Lifshitz. Apparently, the SCROG has been working on affordable housing plans for the various towns in this area. You will be seeing relatively soon a draft affordable housing plan. It has to have a hearing at some point, it has to get adopted. We're on a relatively tight schedule for that, so I have not pulled you in for a lot of discussion with that. I just got notified about it in the last couple of weeks, but I just want to sort of give you a heads up. I have been working with Eugene Lifshitz on getting this put together. You will see a model plan soon, and then we'll ask you for your comments. We're going to need public comments, and again, we need to get it adopted on the books at some point by end of spring. Okay, so.
We don't have anything in our POCD right now?
You do have things in your POCD, and Eugene Lifshitz drew from that. And he also sent me a survey of things that I thought were concerning. And, we had a discussion with Roger as well in on the Zoom call to go over all of that. When I was first hired in October, I was told, oh, don't worry about the affordable housing plans in the POCD, only to find out not actually the case. We need to adopt one separately.
Interesting.
Fortunately, SCROG is putting one together for us.
Yeah.
And we will have it, it needs to be on the books by June 1st, so we're relatively short in the timeframe to turn that around. You will be getting a draft plan within the next couple of weeks, so you can take a look at it.
Cool.
And you will need to have a public hearing on it probably by early May, so that you can have it effective by June 1st, okay?
So what, in our packet, we got a bunch of,
You got a bunch of backup materials that SCROG prepared in connection with putting together the plan. This is not the actual plan, this is just sort of the data that they've collected in preparation for the plan.
So in the plan for the members, they compared Madison, North Branford, and Woodbridge.
Very
Well, they've broken up this, this area, the Scrog area, into pieces. And you're just in the same piece as those other towns for simplicity of drafting a plan. Because otherwise you'd be in the same category as West Haven, New Haven, East Haven, other places that are not really similar in characteristic at all. So they grouped you with other towns that they thought were more or less similar in characteristics for purposes of drafting a plan. You're not getting the same plan, by the way. You're getting your very own plan.
Yes, sir.
They just wanted to make sure that, again, they're sort of grouping you with other towns for purposes of the sorts of questions they ask and the demographics that they're comparing you to. They wanted to have, as compared to what you saw tonight from the applicants here, apples to apples sort of comparisons of demographics, because comparing you to West Haven for demographics is not going to be terribly useful. So that's, again, you're looking at the demographics for these other towns as well.
Trish, to your point about demographics, in this affordable housing, it really demonstrates and categorizes better than the 2019 in the POCD, and also shows a diminishing population in North Branford over the next 8 years by 2,500.
Interesting.
Yeah, you're going down to like 11,300 or something.
From 13 and change down to 11.2.
And again, your school population's going to drop by a quarter.
That just in driving around, there's houses being built.
Yeah, here's the thing.
It's interesting. How are we going down?
Because the number of people per house is dropping dramatically. The number of people per house is moving towards one. So you have many more houses, but many fewer people living in the houses. Very few, okay? Fewer 2 parents, 2 kids, or more than 2 kids houses in town.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so more empty nesters. You do, by the way, have a boom, as was pointed out, in very young families with no kids yet, or 1 kid.
It just ebbs and flows.
But you don't have a lot of 2 families, 2, 3, 4 kids like you used to have back in the 70s, 80s, whatever. So the housing size is going down, even though the number of houses you have may be going up.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay? So that's the difference. Again, the other thing that we have on for tonight is 491 Tucket. We talked about this last time, about the whole issue of the accessory apartment and how that was being done. Trish, if you recall, I sent to you the property.
The other one. Yep.
Okay.
That was
This is
super
the other
helpful.
property here.
Appreciate
This
you
is the
for that.
Panico property here. So this is, my eyesight is not good right now. 9 Westwind, I guess is Drive.
Yes, yep.
Okay, and you can see here, and let me, if I can get one of the extra ones just to give the property owner, so you can see what I'm showing you guys.
There's an extra one.
Okay. We did sort of a comparison with what you have with another property that we have recently, and if you can squint there, see what they're showing.
A quick question. I've heard of West Wind.
That's not his property. He lives at Pawtucket. West Wind is the one that you dealt with Brian Panico a year or 2 ago.
Isn't that off 17?
Well, let me plug it into my phone and we'll figure it out. Okay.
Yeah, so this is the one I was asking for that
Yeah.
sounds similar in concept to what he's asking.
Okay. This is off Middletown Avenue, it says here.
Was that the one on the top of the hill, just past Village?
How do you not know, Ron? I'm surprised you don't know.
Oh.
You
I know,
everything.
it's
Like-
these little.
Yeah, just past Village. Just past Village on the
going
south
up the hill,
side.
On the right-hand
Before you
side.
get-
Oh, yeah.
Before you get to Elpat Coldwater. it says
The
here,
hill
okay?
normally known as 8 Mile Hill, because that little brook on the bottom of the hill is
See?
called 8 Mile
This is
Brook.
why you know everything.
And supposedly it's 8 miles from New Haven.
Interesting.
Okay. Anyway, that's not his property though. That's, his property's on Tucket. But I guess I wanted to give you something that was
Yeah.
similar and recent so you could see what we were talking about. Okay? So, with no further ado, if you want to give your name again here and just discuss your situation, we can get some discussion as to what we're talking about.
So my name is Ryan Casey. I'm at 491 Tucket. As I previously mentioned, I have a family member who's going through a divorce. They live in North Branford. So while he's going through this, we looked at his finances and realized he would not be able to basically pay the mortgage at the rate that his income makes. My wife and I built that house. It broke ground on January 2021, and they were done by June. And we always kind of had thoughts of, telling the builder, like, hey, it's okay, in the future, we might want to build an in-law. He's like, okay, you got the space, it's all good. And that's kind of where we left it. So we didn't think this would happen for many years down the line. So we do want him to stay with us in North Branford. I've been looking, I see the houses every day, and it's very, very tough to compete, especially with the situation he's going in. So I reached out to Eric, not knowing too much about the regulations. I first came and said, hey, let's do a detached garage, nice little 700 square feet or something like that on top. And then I learned that that's actually not allowed in North Branford. It has to be attached. So then Eric sent me over the regulations, and it stated that it has to share a common wall, ceiling, or floor. So then I came back to Eric, and I said, well, what if we created a hallway from my garage, then you have the hallway, to his garage, because he is in construction, so I want to make sure he has room for his trucks and his tools and all that, and then build, make it the habitable living above. And that's where he left it off, and he's like, why don't you come by the meeting, and so here I am. And,
So say it again, we want to do, I understood it last week, or last meeting, but I'm not getting it now.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
Because I'm a visual person, so
Do you
that's
have
why
a
I'm
picture?
Well, I can draw it out really quick. I don't have
Oh, no, I see the paper on the floor, I thought you had it.
Oh, yeah, that's not really, I can show you something, but I don't
Let's
have
have Eric take
Okay.
it.
You've got a house with a garage. He then wants to run off of the unfinished side of the garage a hallway. At the end of the hallway, there's going to be a second garage, on top of which is going to be the accessory apartment. So it's going to be house, garage, hallway, garage,
House above.
and then the new bedroom on top of the second garage, which, again, didn't seem to track with the whole common wall phenomenon there, but again, he's indicating, look, it's got a common ceiling, common floor, it's also sort of attached. I said, yeah, kind of making me uncomfortable, but I wanted to bring it to you guys to get your sense as to whether you thought that was close enough under the regulations I should approve it, or whether it was not consistent with your goals for accessory apartments. So that's where we are. And again, your regulations, you can decide whether this is close enough or this is not close enough. So I have no great wisdom on this, but it just seemed something that you guys needed to make a judgment call on.
So it needs to be attached to the primary residence?
It needs to be attached to the primary residence, that much is clear. And again, by attached, it says in your regs, it has to have common wall, common floor, common ceiling. And again, because it's on the far side of unimproved land, unimproved garage rather, you have to walk through the unimproved garage into the hallway to the next building, or not, the next garage, and then this would be above the second garage. So is that still part of the same building, or is this different enough that it's not?
The question, let me jump in here first.
Go ahead.
Will it have electrical and plumbing?
No, well, what, the hallway or the apartment?
The apartment.
Well, clearly the apartment has to, yes.
Yes, it has, the apartment has to. And will that comply with the septic system and the well with distances and?
So
Yeah.
we're on city water, so we don't have that issue. And then as far as septic goes, it would be its own septic system. And I already had a company, Septicology.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I keep thinking the mic's on, just like that gentleman. So I was going to have its own septic system. I made sure that I reached out to, is that not right?
You're gonna put in a whole new septic system?
We don't, for one bedroom, it's just gonna be him. It's not gonna be huge, as far as the tank goes.
Would it
or-
be cheaper just to pipe it into your system?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I'll cross that road when I get there, I mean, but,
I mean, ultimately, it's not for
Yeah.
zoning to decide whether he needs health department. If he can't be a health department, then we don't care. That's for him to solve the health department. When he gets there, he gets there. But ultimately, if he doesn't meet zoning, he'll never get to the health department.
Right.
So your question is, when you're thinking about your regs and what you mean by accessory apartment, is this what you thought you meant, or is this not what you thought you meant? And that, again, I have my own sort of preset things of where I was before in Westbrook and Clinton, but I haven't been here long enough to know what you think of your own regulations. So that's why we're here to sort of get your own sense of your own regulations and that sort of thing.
So that's a little different than what you handed out.
This is only, I gave this to you because it was a recent example of a situation
Of like
where.
something is in between the apartment and the house. That's why I went for this.
This is Brian Panico's
Yeah.
house, as opposed to the subdivision he showed you before.
Gotcha.
Brian Panico's house is a situation where the new accessory apartment wasn't with a common wall to an existing bedroom, in essence, right? It's somewhat separated, and you thought it was still close enough that you were willing to approve it. So Brian Panico got approval for what you're looking at on this piece of paper.
And I asked for it because I'm like, well, what's the difference between a whole big garage or a hallway? So
There may be no
it
difference,
still
but-
shares a common, and then, so that's, I don't know, like Bill said, the intention, of the reg was to prevent, just having like almost a multifamily housing situation, or obviously we don't want detached. I'm still unclear as what the vision was in, the accessory dwelling units, because I wasn't there either when it was created. But just based on precedent and what I see going up around town, like, I've seen some pretty big additions go up to a house where it's damn near the same size as the house, or it doubles the size, and it's like, I don't know, what's the difference? It's the same to me, this. But it's everybody's.
Yeah,
Is this, are you planning to put this on the same electrical, what's it called, the service, or is it gonna have its own service? It's gonna be the same as the existing house?
so, yeah, it'll be coming off my electricity.
Right,
and
so
I'll
then the
just-
only thing separate would be its own septic.
Its own septic.
Right.
And
And
even
then-
that's questionable.
Yeah.
And
At
that's,
this point.
and then we'll just take it from there, but like
And
Eric said, I gotta.
I think with that being said, I think that helps to kind of, in the sense of the initial deterrent, to make it not, so we don't have multifamily houses. It seems that it's still pretty intertied to its, that it's connected. It's not like a true duplex or something like that. And it seems like whether it's a hallway or a wall or a floor or a ceiling, the attach is still attached. To me, it seems like it.
What's the difference between building an addition on your house versus putting an in-law apartment in terms of our regs or
This is gonna
town?
have a kitchen and a bathroom, so therefore it.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
Because it has its own kitchen and bathroom, it is its own.
It's a separate
it's a-
dwelling unit.
It's a separate,
Oh, that helps me understand.
okay? If it doesn't have a kitchen and a bathroom, then it's just another bedroom, and then I don't care. But because it has its own kitchen and bathroom, that makes it accessory apartment.
And I know we opted out of it, but didn't the state, didn't they create more flexibility in?
Absolutely they did, but you opted out.
We opted out, yeah.
Okay, so I
Which is
can't,
fine.
yeah, I
We
can't,
like having more discretion.
and I can't tell you, you have to follow things you deliberately opted out of, so.
I know, that would be a little silly. I don't know, like I said, the regs say it has to share a wall, ceiling, or floor.
Yes.
Cannot be in a breezeway. Ron, what are you thinking?
But it's not gonna be a breezeway, it's gonna be an
It's gonna be
enclosed-
hallway, correct.
A hallway with
It's
a floor, a
enclosed-
ceiling, and a
yeah.
wall.
And probably heat of some kind.
I see a floor, a ceiling, and a wall. I see it's all attached.
And on the same,
And-
and on the,
Keeping the family together.
I'm with you.
It's
It's
a
a
noble
it's a
cause.
Hallmark movie story, right?
Yeah.
The family together.
Your side or her side?
What's that?
He's saying your side or her
Oh,
side?
it's her side,
Oh, admirable.
right?
What are your thoughts?
What have we done in the past?
We,
Are we setting precedent, or this already established already in this particular situation? will it then evolve into something where you've got, this guy has a hallway, it's close enough, it's got a roof attached, I'm just saying. Right? Which slippery slope we want to go down, right? And how many did we already approve? The intent is attached, right, of some form. Panico has a garage separating the two, but it's actually attached. The garage is attached, then the addition's attached. In this particular example, and how many other ones are similar where they're actually attached? I mean, I've seen one more breezeways when it's just the roofs are attached, but it's just a garage. Then you go, okay, there's a breezeway attached to the garage, and then we had another building next to it with a hallway. But nothing, you kind of separated and got away from the, I'll call it the intent, maybe?
I know Bill said the intent was, a reintegration back into the main house.
That was my, not Bill's.
Oh, all right, that was your statement.
That was mine, not his.
Okay, thank you
And
for the
again,
correction.
I said that based on what I've seen in Westbrook and Clinton. I don't know if that's what you guys
I
are
don't know
reading
what the
here.
intent was, but
So,
we say not detached, it has to be, it has to share, it's almost, if I would think, like, if I was a lawyer, I'd be like, it's attached, you don't say it has to be an entire wall, you don't say it has to be living room to living room. So I don't know what the intention was, but the words aren't there, so my perspective comes from looking at it, more legally. And then the other perspective is this, like, somebody put a whole, garage in between the in-law, this is a hallway. And I don't know, it is a good question, like, what precedent we're setting, I don't, like, across the street, there's a hallway that, it's a hallway, it's not a breezeway, it's a hallway that goes to a garage. The house next to me, it was an addition that's bigger connecting the garage. I don't think it's going to evolve into a monster. I could be wrong. I feel like, no, it won't evolve into a monster.
Eric, was it I'm sorry, was the relative to the common wall too, did it define closer to the main building, had any comment, so the common wall of the house? Or the floor of the house, or anything, it just said in general?
Common wall, floor, or ceiling, that's really all it said, okay? So, again, it is nebulous enough that I gave what I thought was my take on it, but I said, look, I don't have confidence that I'm right here, so let's go and talk to the commission. And that's why we're here. So.
Because if you wanted it to be mush, touching, then you would have just said that. You know what I mean? A reg would have just said, there needs to be no space. Why are we saying, why was it delineated common wall, floor, or ceiling? So that's why it's like.
As you learned tonight when drafting regulations.
Yeah, you don't know what it evolves into, yeah.
And it comes down to our making the decision here, and I think it gives us that flexibility where when it's an in-law apartment, we can allow it, and when it's somebody trying to add a duplex or a rental or something that's not as the same, we could say, well, that doesn't work.
Those were great questions. Is it on the same electricity and all that? That was a great point, but that's not creating duplex.
So I had a deal, I'm not sure if this could work out anyway, but I had a deal in Guilford, it was a condo, and there's only a certain amount of people that can lease within the HOA. But considering it's a family member, they don't count that as part of the percentage, right? So I'm not sure if there's something that I can put anywhere or an agreement where it's just family only, and it's not like, hey, I'm here to make,
The way accessory apartments work is that the owner needs to live in either the main house or the accessory apartment.
Okay.
So you don't have to have a family member on both sides of that wall.
Okay.
Okay, so when your father-in-law decides he wants his own place, you're free to rent it to somebody else.
Gotcha.
But you can't rent out both halves. You have to be in either the main house or the accessory. We don't care which.
Yeah.
But I'm not able by my regs to stop you from renting it out to somebody else once your father-in-law leaves.
Or my wife tells me to go in that section. No, she's a nice lady.
Right.
I'm flexible.
You know, that was on tape.
That's all right. Yeah, I told her. I was like, oh, the website's down tonight. She's like, what? It's on MySpace.
flexible and supportive of it.
I'm flexible and supportive of it as well.
What'd you say? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
I'm flexible and supportive of it, with
Mhm.
the hallway being there, for both reasons. Looking at the regs, it's not clear, and, based on what's been done, trying to prevent a slippery slope. You can't control what somebody, again, I agree, we can't control what's gonna happen in the future with that. And even if it was attached, and there was no hallway, people could still rent it out anyway. So I know we're trying to prevent something, but, people could still live there even if it was in closer proximity to the main house. So I'm okay with it, and it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too.
You fleshed it out enough?
The
You're-
fact that the utilities are tied into the main house, there's no separate
that was a great
service.
point.
There's no separate septic system, there's no separate plumbing.
Well, except for the septic, but that's okay, that's understandable. Since
Yeah,
you
I mean,
do
if
one
it.
small septic, which is
Yeah,
fine.
if you had to put a separate septic, that's
fine.
that's fine, but when you crunch the numbers, you're gonna dig that pipe.
I know, right? Yeah,
Connect to the-
probably.
connect to the-
Probably. I figure one step at a time.
I'm okay.
I would just need more information, so we're not deciding on anything at this point in time, it's just a
Well,
conversation, are we not?
No, I mean, ultimately, if you guys tell me that I can give him a zoning permit, he's gonna pull the zoning permit tomorrow and go build. So this is the determination of, yes, he can build, no, he can't build.
What other information do you need? Or want?
Let's see what the reg says.
I just
True.
happen to have the book.
No, that's fine, I can go get my book and I'll take a look.
No, what number are we looking at? Zoning map, permit uses?
No,
we don't need a
there's this whole
motion. I don't
separate
think we go
section
over
for accessory apartments.
I can
Gotcha.
Should we have to be anonymous?
And I will go get my regs and then we'll go take a look, because I have the book wrong.
No.
No.
Record.
You get it.
Is it like 42? I feel like the number 42 is popping in my head.
You got a good
I
memory.
was gonna say 39.
Going once.
Sounds like 40, low
twice.
40s, high 30s.
Special use permits, 42?
Accessory dwelling unit, I think it's a 42.
Okay.
Ooh, the race is on. Who's gonna get the answers?
Let's see what we can. Just tell me. 4-61, look at page 4-61.
Well, you guys are really on.
Yeah, right.
That was the
exactly
page
what I was
number.
gonna say.
Yeah, the
But I wanted to
You get the
put it in
floor.
the room.
But what's the section number? I think it's 42.
Section, okay. Accessory dwelling units, 44.8,
All right.
okay?
The purpose of this section is to promote the general welfare of the town by allowing an alternative dwelling. Okay?
Okay, and the section we've all been sort of talking about specifically says, in D, both dwelling units shall be attached by a common wall, floor, or ceiling, and not simply attached by a breezeway or porch, and shall be contained in one building. The building's appearance shall conform with the single-family character of the neighborhood, preserving natural topographic features and the historic values of the area.
That's a different story now.
Both dwellings. So that's the commonality
supposed to
where
look
we're
like a
looking for to
single-
tie in the common wall to make them.
Yeah, and it's supposed to look like a single-family house.
Well, let me
Read it again.
The building's appearance shall conform with the single-family character of the neighborhood, preserving natural topographic features and the historic values of the area. And I can pull it out and show it to you, if that would be easier for you.
Yeah. And contained in one building, is that?
Well, yeah, I will give this to you to read, okay?
Shall be contained in one building. That's why Brian's also is different. Because isn't there something different with Brian's, like, there was something different with Brian's, the way his
I don't see
elevation is.
this, this is a, I mean, if you're, this is just a couple squares, but this is a garage in the middle of two different
Shall be
dwellings. and
contained
this-
in one building. He had something with his elevation though, with the ceiling, And it was still it was still one building.
So it's all uniform, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I got
I don't know,
that.
I see this would be pretty similar to a hallway versus a garage. I'm still thinking that there's that flexibility in there to
I
have
gotta
it.
switch up my thinking with that contained in one building.
And again, folks, if you still want more time to mull this over, this is not an application. So you
how
can
far-
ask for more time to think this
you gotta
over.
follow
How
the
far
rules.
away is the main house from the
Hallway?
the garage, the hallway thing?
So how far would
How
it be?
far?
Well, it could be as long as far as you guys want it to go.
So yeah, I gotta take, because it says contained in one building, I
Right.
gotta
No,
take
no,
back
what-
my
what-
analysis.
You want to attach the main house to the garage, right?
Well,
No, to the unit.
Yeah,
well,
there's,
okay,
yeah.
the house already has a garage.
Okay.
So there's a house with a garage now, that's already on the site.
Mhm.
You then put a door on the unfinished garage that would open to a hallway. You would walk down the hallway, as long or as short as you guys would let him do, to the next garage, unfinished,
Mhm.
above which would be this new dwelling unit.
Okay, so you have a house,
House with
a
garage.
and you're gonna put a second garage.
You're gonna put a separate garage detached,
Mhm.
but with a hallway attaching, right? Because you couldn't be a breezeway, can't be a porch. It's gotta be a hallway that is space, that has walls, a ceiling, a floor, that attaches these two garages together.
But it has
How-
the line contained in one building. That at that point is not one
How
building.
wide is a
it's two.
room?
Hmm?
20 by 20, garage is 26 by 26.
No, no,
or-
I'm saying, you know,
That's the room.
we can't do a breezeway.
You cannot do a breezeway.
Right, a breezeway is 4 or 6 feet?
Well,
What I'm saying is, if you do a room, 15 by 8 or 10, that's not a breezeway, that's a room, that's a.
well, he's proposing basically what it amounts to that. He's giving you a breezeway with walls on the side.
Right, that,
And
That's,
I think too, I'm not sure if you're going to the side or the back of the house with the garage, but looks like he has a house, and then this is the garage, and there's gonna be what, there's another garage. I think that holds in the same compound. It's depending on how wide you go with that,
right.
it still
That's
looks uniform and
Semantics, I
connected.
think, you know, you want to
I
call
don't
it a
think it's a
banquet
problem.
room instead of
Yeah.
a walkway,
Sure.
you know,
I can turn to
No,
my
but
daughter's playroom.
even Brian's connection had, it was still one building, because it was this, the elevation, it wasn't so distinctly separated. It was still looking like a uniform building. There was just a elevation down, because I think his hill went down, and then there was still shared space, like there was the laundry room, you know, between the sections, so his was contained in one building. This is two buildings, so now I'm changing up my, because I follow the words, and the words say contained in one building, so what you're proposing isn't one building, it's two separate ones.
how far away is
So you just
the
might have
main
to
house
redesign it.
to the first garage, and the first garage to the second garage?
The garage in the house is one thing.
yeah, it's a single-family house with a garage, it's part of the,
Attached or detached?
Here's the house, here's my house. This helps a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's the garage, so I figured something going out this way.
Yeah, that would be two buildings.
Oh, no, another. To me, it looks like it would be all set, and I think under the circumstances, I think the hallway, whatever we call it, connecting them wouldn't make it look that off, putting on another.
and again,
Couple
it
garages.
sounds like you're now split more two
Now
to
what you
two.
do.
And
Because it's not contained in one
let me
building.
bring this up, let me ask this, now,
Yeah.
if we wanted to build a two-car garage right here,
Mhm.
is that a problem?
No.
No.
They'd be wall to wall though.
Well, no,
And the
yeah.
roof lines would be the similar.
But if we wanted
Similar.
to, right? No, but with,
Just a garage.
It was
just a
It was
garage.
a garage
No
with
living.
no accessory
Right.
unit.
right here.
It would not need to be attached. It
So
would be a separate
to
garage.
me, I'm seeing that
But-
the fact that visually, right, and part of the wording there, it was talking about being uniform and visually. If I'm driving down the street and I see another detached garage versus a garage with a hallway that unbeknownst to somebody driving by, there's an in-law apartment, it's one and the same.
Mhm.
I think under the circumstances, I think that keeping with the visual aesthetics of the area, of the property, of probably neighboring houses, you know, adding an additional, that essentially is a garage with an apartment above it.
Mhm.
I think that it's gonna be still uniform, keeping with the words of the, in the actual code, that essentially is being there to make it so it looks good and it's appealing to everybody driving by, and essentially
You
the
will be
town.
you will be adhering to the architectural style of the house.
Right.
Right.
You're not gonna put up an eyesore, is what I'm saying.
No,
Right,
no,
no.
my wife, I
And-
mean, we just spent a whole bunch of money on this house. My wife doesn't want it, so all of a sudden look like there's a growth coming out of the side of our,
And my point is, I'm saying as well, is that the fact that you could put a garage here,
Mhm.
the same size, I'm sure,
Right.
similar size that he wants to build without the hallway. And so I don't, to me,
The
it
only
seems
thing I
one
would
and the
say to
same.
that is, the statute changed to allow detached accessory apartments unless you opted out of that, which North Branford specifically did.
Right.
So clearly, there was some sentiment you did not want detached accessory apartments. I
Right.
don't know what that was.
And
That
I
was-
think it
that's-
comes down to the fact that we want to hold that ability, that discretion, or the decision-making thing.
Yeah, that's why we're here
Right.
to talk about it.
And
And if you can't, if this is something you still need more time to determine, or you think you need a fifth vote because you have 2-2, again, this is not an application, there's no time deadline on this. But I think, again, I brought the property owner to describe it, you've got a better sense as to what we're talking about. If you want to take more time to consider it, that's entirely up to you. There is no statutory deadline that I'm working under, other than his desire to get the house built.
Yeah. Again, yeah, I didn't know there was that other line, so contained in one building is very different than that not being in there. So there's a way you can design it so it looks more like it's just one building.
So Eric and I talked about that. That's basically not gonna, like, all my wall down from the side of my house, right? Because I have to get the same level, so now I have, instead of like a huge hallway, I guess I have a church, right? It's gonna be like long and very tall ceilings. And then here's my garage, here's whatever. So I guess if the hallway matches the same height, and then I just kinda, I mean, it's kind of, I mean.
I think that sounds more unnecessary than having just a hallway. And I think at the end of the day, you know, the circumstances,
You know,
what's reasonable.
I think, like I said, a hallway is not allowed. A banquet room, you could walk through.
Right.
So add a couple of feet on it,
Yeah.
you know.
So we gotta wait for Bill to come.
Okay, so where are we, folks?
Okay, that being the case,
Mhm.
I'll make a decision here. I'd like to see a better drawing
Mhm.
of
Sure.
what you're planning on doing.
Sure. Okay. I can do it, yeah.
Yeah, I think then we'll.
Gotta follow the regs.
Yeah.
Contained in one building.
Right, so it's,
So.
if you add on to your main house
Yes.
with a banquet room and attach another garage to your banquet room, would that fall under the regs?
I'm tired. 2, you lost me at, and I'm hungry, and you lost me at, why are we talking about banquet room?
He's just using a different name.
Because we can't do a hallway.
Oh.
And, I mean. and-
Whatever you do, as long as it looks like one building and it
I
fits
think
into the
though-
character of the neighborhood, cool.
I think that one building though is, once again, in the eyes of the beholder. It
That's
really
rid of
is
the
one
words.
building. It could be, you know, if you look at, there's a lot of buildings that have interesting designs, that have
Brian came up with one, I guess.
different, you know, heights and hallways catching them, you know.
Barbara would pull him.
There you go.
It could be an art studio for that.
Right. I just think that,
I didn't make the regs up.
but I think we are split, and
Yeah, we'll wait for
we either need a fifth person to be a tiebreaker.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
I think, you know.
And again, that gives you 3 weeks to come up with new drawings, if you want to bring in your own drawing of what you think this is going to look
Doesn't
like.
have
So,
to be,
let me ask you, so obviously I'll draw, but I don't know exactly, like, I have an idea what we want to be built, but as far as like the length of the hallway or the length of the banquet room or whatever, I really don't know, right? So I'm just trying to see if this was done first, because I don't want something to come in here and be like, what is this, you know, but, you know, I mean, I can have, like I said, my person moving in there is a builder, so.
Why do you have to go to the side? Can you go back, like make an L?
Well, that'd be the same thing still. I would have to do it unless I'm taking the roof and the backside of my house.
Like I said, this had a, there was a comment, like the hallway, it was the.
There's also
laundry
the septic separation issue, that you can't go back there without being too close to the septic
Yeah.
leaching fields. So he's going in the only direction he may be able to go on, given
Given
where
the
the septic.
land layout and all that.
So,
That's why architects are paid a lot of money, I guess, figure it out.
anyway, folks, now you understand why I brought it to you folks, because it was unclear enough or vague enough that I wanted to get some additional input. And I'm not sure we're necessarily better off today than we were a month ago, but.
Yeah, that's how it is.
I guess the bottom line is, it's gonna be all on Bill.
Well,
No
not
pressure.
necessarily, but.
I don't know, we can see.
because
We can put the pressure on him, we'll throw him under the bus.
It could be Bill, or it could be somebody else, your new alternate
And
shows
Les,
up, or
have
whatever
you
else.
had any inputs in the last few minutes, or?
So
I know we were
the-
talking a lot, and
The question is, he understands banquet hall, hallway won't work, common alley must look like a single-family home. So that's your task, to try to figure out how that will all mix and match and still meet the regs without having a text amendment change.
Okay. So this is
So you're
almost,
given the guides in the regs in page 4-62, right?
should I bring
The building's
multiple-
appearance shall conform with the single-family character of the neighborhood, preserve natural blah, 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 right? And not simply attached by a banquet hall, hallway, whatever you want to call it, right? So think outside the box and what you want to achieve and still fit in our regs without having to come to a zoning
And
change.
if you want to bring multiple designs.
That's what we're gonna have to do, right? So it's really this thing in between that we're deciding, because I have an idea, it's gonna be beautiful, the garage and that, it's just how are we gonna make this
Look like a single family house.
look like a single-family house? And that's up to, if you guys feel like my drawings or the drawings of the architect is a single-family. See, it's kind of weird, because the guy next to me has a 3-car garage, and it goes out that way too. I'm just like, oh, let me just, I'm just looking for.
Pictures of that.
Okay, well, see, it's a little bit different because he doesn't have.
You could put,
You see what I mean? Like, that's what most people would probably do anyway. Get the fact that
pool
you
room,
can't-
a family room, and go, I don't know how you do it, but.
But it doesn't really matter, right? So if I'm looking at the house
Yeah,
and I have a
it's-
pool
You gotta
room,
make it
it's
look like
still
a-
gonna be the same width and height from, you're not gonna look over the top and be like, wow, that goes really back, and you can fit a pool. It's gonna
It
be
needs to be
kind
contained in
of.
one building, a hallway and 2 things on the side of it is 2 buildings.
Okay.
And
would think
I don't,
more
but see, I
towards-
disagree. I would say it's
so it
one
goes
building,
along,
because it's
not
got the
set
same
back.
electrical unit.
Right. Yeah, we kinda
The
want that.
same water pipe, and it's all
Okay, well,
attached.
in
I
any
would say
event,
it's one building.
I
We're
appreciate
now
the time,
approaching 10
guys.
o'clock.
Yeah.
So what do we-
Yeah. You have your homework,
Yes, absolutely.
/ we'll debate it again.
Okay. I'll come
Thank
up with
you
multiple
for
things.
saying
You guys
this.
say that was a
Saying
long.
you've been
Yeah,
here.
he's got
No,
all kinds
you've
of
been here all
different
night.
roof lines anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's,
You want your picture back?
Yes.
Anything
Yes.
else?
Paid a lot of money for that.
Ron, tee it up. Ron, you gonna tee it up?
Come on, kid.
so, in light of Bill decided to have this meeting on St. Patrick's Day, and UConn was playing, and because I wasn't watching, they lost, I motion we adjourn.
Second.
All
Second.
in favor?
All in favor?
To find out if Bill went to an Irish place.
Any opposite, any opposed?
Aye, everybody. The ayes have it.
None. Passes. We're good.
Thank you.
We said we just
It's
did
been
it.
fun.
Guys, thanks again.